Kia ora no tātou, no mai, hoki mai, and welcome back to our wonderful kōrero, Ngā Tai o te Pari ata, o Pari ata, for this afternoon. I hope that you enjoyed this morning. I really loved it. E rawe ngā kai kōrero katoa. Me te pai o te nohotahi, aha koa kai tawhiti tātou, we really did get that sense of being together, particularly because you were also good at using the emoji functions, the live chat. Those are all the things that we'd love for you to continue to do. In the same format for this afternoon, that we have our kai kōrero and then we have our Q&A, but you can actually ask questions at any time. Te kaunga hoki o ngā pātai ahua mā, and you're sending such good questions, and I will make sure that we don't get any more spoiler alerts, but just the actual info, ngari tino pai te wānanga o te other name. And as it was pointed out by Rihanna, we are under a federal moon. And so being at home probably is quite appropriate. I know that I'm enjoying being in my slippers and enjoying my candle. Ara, mea waipuna rangi, because it is raining here in Tamaki Makaurau. I have my rongoā rehu korokoro. And Whaia Donna is like, oh, Kari, you've got a bit of a cough. Let me send you something else. Koia kaya koutou ngā kai hapai i ngā Rongoā Māori mai kore ake koutou. So enjoying being with you all. So let's get into our next session for this afternoon. Mā tātou katoa. Ngā Tai o te Pari ata, the incoming tides, referencing the federal moon that we sit under. In this session, we reflect, we envision, and prepare for the soaring energies and possibilities that lie ahead. Kia mau mahara tātou. So just to remember, if you experience any technical difficulties, please don't think it's you. It will be the technology. So just use the live support, and during the sessions, you can access that at the top of your screen on the right. And if you do have any problems because of your internet bandwidth, just click on the audio video issues text, which is right below the video there, and you can choose any of the backup streams. They are lower latency, as they say. So they're just coming on the down low. I think that's what they mean. Closed captions are available in English. Just click on the CC button. And throughout the conference, please submit those pātai, as we say, in the live Q&A icon. The discussion is actually kia whakawhiti kōrero ai koutou, so that you can speak to each other. But the live Q&A goes directly to our kai kōrero. The other thing that can happen is it can be sent to them, so that if you need a specific answer, they've been really generous in offering to do that as well and send it back. Now, all of our kōrero from this morning is up on our site, and that will continue throughout the afternoon. But we are really looking forward to our next kōrero. No reira e mihi ana kia kōrua tahi, Margaret Broodcorn and Matua Hone Tai Mona. Hone Tai Mona, taurehere o Hauora Hokianga, and Margaret Broodcorn, Ahorangi o Hauora Hokianga, will present the journey of the organisation's kaupapa Rongoā service. Born from ngā moimoia o ngā tupuna over the last 3 years, the passion, energy and commitment of whānau and kaimahi have moved those aspirations into reality. Taumata Rongoā o Hauora Hokianga, nau mai, whakapiri mai tēnā korua.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Ko wai au, ko whire te maunga, ko hokianga whakapau kariki te moana, ko Ngāti Wharara, ko Ngāti Korokoro me te paka ngāha pū, ko ngā pui te iwi. He mahi ana hau, he ahorangi o Hauora Hokianga. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora anō. It's my pleasure to be here today. I'm just going to get Matahone and Faith to introduce themselves. And today we bring you a beautiful video, ahua of our journey, as Stacey has said. And so following Matahone's introduction and kōrero, we'll play this video. And just as well, because I've just got out of isolation today, back at Mahi, and I'll probably run out of steam anyway in the next 10 minutes. But just as well, we put a video together for you for the next 28 minutes to share our journey of rongoā development here at Hauora Hokianga. Nō reira, kia ora, ngā mihi hone, me koe hoki Faith.
Ai mai rore kia tātou I tēni wahanga o te hui, ko māua tahi, ko taku hoaranga tira, tēni ko māua tahi ki rote te kaupapa, a te wahanga kia taumata rongoā o Hauora Hokianga. Ka tukuna ko te kiriata, māne kōrero te wahanga ki ngā mahi a whakatipu tunu nei e mātu ki roti te hokianga, nā ki roti te hoipere, no rea ka tukuna mā te kiriata me te kaupapa nā ka whakamāra mā ki te timatanga mai o tā mātou kaupau. No rea ka nui te mihi ki a koe te katoa.
Oh, kia ora. So thank you, Hone and Faith. And they're down in Tamaki Makaurau today. I'm up here in Hokianga and it's a bit wet. I think it's a bit wet all around. Hopefully our connectivity will be good and we won't have any technological glitches. But I'll hand over to the team to play our video. Kia ora.
Manuhiri tuarangi ki rungi te papa whenua e takato nei e. Ki tō mātou mara te paukarari ki e karanga atu ki a koutou. Haere mai raro te koroa o hauoro hokianga. Haere mai, haere mai, haere mai rā.
Tuia te kawe, tairanga te kawe, ko te kawe o tēnei wāranga, wāranga luku, wāranga rangi, wāranga kia tū, kia longo, kia tāne, kia hine. Tēnei te kaupapa kai e ke kirungi te taumato te rangi, tū mai te toki e haumi e hui e tāheki e.
Kia ora, nā mai haere mai ki Hokianga. Hokianga Health Enterprise Trust was established in 1993 and oversees Hauora Hokianga, which is a recognised kaupapa Māori health and social service provider here in Taitokiro. Members of the Trust are elected from the 10 clinic areas of Hokianga, thereby the organisation is representative of, owned and governed by the people of Hokianga. Our organisation is based mainly at the Rural Hospital here, located in Raone, and provides a comprehensive integrated range of health and social services to the Hokianga whānau of over 7,500 people.
Ko mātei tēnei ko taumata rongoā o Hauora Hokianga. He kaupapa tēnei whakahaeringi ana e mātou ki roto i tō mātou molaito hoipere nei, o paukarari ki te ingoa. Ko te mea, hele peta tahi rereketanga o ngā mahi nei taumata rongoā, hele te me he kaupapi haere mai waho, pene te me nei nā tāmaki hou mai, nā te kāwanatanga hou mai, he kaupapi whānau mai roto i te hoipere, he whānau mai roto i te hiehio ngā kaimahi Māori to hoipere, he mea karanga anō i roto i te iwi, pere te mea ni pātoto i te iwi ki ngā pāte to hoipere, kei e kewa kou te kaupapa mahi rongoā, kei he tēne, kei he tērā. He kaupapa i timata mai i roto i Ngā Tai e rua me te hāpe ki muri. E runga anō te hiehio te iwi, i te hiehio te kāinga. E runga anō te tahi mauri nui i ara ake, i roto i te hikoi o te tahi o ngā whanau ngota kāinga, tahi wāki tuhine i a tānia whilia. Nāne te tahi kaupapa rangatira i hanga, nā noi whakatakoto te tahi huarahi, i hikoi ai e tau huarahi kamite me te iwi katoa ki muri aia. Nāne i hanga me tāna hoa piripono a TC McVeigh, ka hanga rāua te tahi kiriata kōrero mo te āhuatanga o tāna hikoi. Ia e rapu haerana, ia e takahi atu ana i te huarahi ki te ora mo te tahi māuiwitanga nui ki runga iaia, ki runga iaia i roto i ngā tau ki muri. No reira, nā tērā āhuatanga i tā mai tāna tono ki te hoipere. Ngā runga katoa Hokianga i tāna tono. Hau ngānu ki te hoipere tūnei, ngali ki ngā hoipere te taitokarau. Me tāna tono kaha ki te tari hauora i roto pōneke. Kei he te wāhi, te wahanga. Kei he ngā hakaoro, he hanga whakaoro. Kei he te wahanga mo tēnei mea, mo tēnei taonga, mo tēnei tikanga, mo te rongoā. No reira, koe e tera ko te tahi mauri nui i hāpai ai te whakaaro, i hiki ngai te wairua, i rewa i te reo i roto ia mātu ngā kai mai te hoipere, kami te meti iwi katoa te Hokianga ki te hoipere, ki Hauora Hokianga, he nā tahuri mai, he nā hurihia mai ki ngā kaupapa rongoā, ngā kaupapa e ōraita tangata.
Ordinary doctors, our Western medicine doctors, alongside our Rongoā Māori practitioners. So it can be done. We just need to become our own staunchest advocates.
No reira ka timata. Ka timata mātou i te whakatū, he rā kotahi ki konei roto i te molaito hoipere. No reira ia mātou i konei, kei konei tunu mātou, e kaha tunu nei te tupu o te kaupapa, kaha nei tō mātou whakahaere te kaupapa. I te timatanga mai ka hore he rawa. Ana te rawa ko te malaine. Ana te wāhine ka homei ko te malaine. Me ngā kaupapa katoa I woho. Ka mitu me te tautoko, ngā marae katoa te kāinga, ngā whānau te kāinga, me te tiri. O ngā ringa, ngā reo, ngā pautuora I tautoko ia mai te kaupapa I roti tō mātou hikoitanga I ngā rā, I ngā tau e rua me te hāpe kimuri. Tai rawa mai ki tēnei rā nei, I te tau kua pahure, ka riro ia mātou te tahi kirimana. Tautoko mai a te hoipera te taitoko rau, Northern DHP. I te taima te kaumātu te paraunga Harold Wereta ia te kaitataki o te wahanga Māori o te DHP, rua tau me te hāpe ki muri. I oti ia te tahi kaupapa. Kaupapa nāne I haere ki roti te taitoko rau katoa, ngā wahanga tō te taitoko rau. Me tara noho tahi ki roti te iwi, ka noho ai te whakarongo.
I was invited to Hokianga by our then General Manager Harold Wereta, who had previously undertaken consultation with our taitokero whānau, and the vision that came out of those hui were healthy whānau, happy whānau, and our voices are heard. And one of the pieces of the kaupapa that came out of that was the Rongoā Māori funded services.
We have, over the last few years, created some rongoā that is just purposeful for the people of Hokianga. And the relevance, I suppose, of having that is that people have another option of how they want to look after themselves.
We've successfully graduated over 100 tauira with a level 3 and a level 4 tohu in tikanga a Rongoā Māori. And we are currently working within Hohi Pere spaces, the hospital walls, where we've delivered these tohu to a range of not just whānau in our community but many workers within the hospital. We are the first hospital within Aotearoa to deliver a Rongoā Māori tohu, as well as the first hospital in Aotearoa to have a manager who has obtained a Rongoā Māori tohu. We have been very successful with our graduation rate, and we now have at least 85 practitioners within our community practicing Rongoā Māori.
We offer miri as a service for 2 days a week. We also, in winter, go out and see kuia and kaumātua as it's cold, and for them to come out. So we provide that service. We've also been doing the health, the staff here during COVID, as they also needed the mahi done for themselves to work through COVID. I've also done level 3 and level 4 with Ringa Atawhai Rongoā. It's been an amazing journey. It really has.
My journey with our Taumata Rongoā team began when I did our Ringa Atawhai Rongoā level 3 and level 4 courses here at the Hohipere. It was what a journey it was to be able to do it not only through the Hohipere, but to be able to do it alongside a lot of our kaimahi here at the Hohipere.
Tahi! Tahi! Tahi!
When I came to Hauora Hokianga, I came from Australia, so I had no knowledge at all about rongoā. I had a little bit of knowledge about Māori, my whānau's Māori, but it was a learning curve for me. So I came into a hospital environment where people were asking for alternative things for their treatment. They were asking for rongoā, and I'd go, okay, I'll go and find out about that. They wanted karakia before they were transferred out by helicopter, or if they were going to another hospital. And I found that was really a really satisfying part of the job, to actually be able to provide something for the people that I was working with who were frightened and anxious, and the whānau that were frightened and anxious. So that started me thinking about what works, what do Māori want, and what makes them feel at home, what is right for them. And I guess things progressed, and I got to know more people here, and I started on a learning curve or a journey for myself. And then Honi Taimona came and said, we want to start to introduce rongoā into the hospital. We're going to do some training for the staff. And I thought, wow, this is great. This is what I've been looking for. And I thought, if rongoā's coming into the hospital where I work, I want to know about it. I want to understand it, and I want to get a better idea of what it's about for the people that I'm looking after. So I committed myself to the first year, which was the level 3 rongoā, and I came into it not knowing what it was going to be about. And I was amazed, I was surprised, it was life-changing. I'm going to cry. I just learnt so much about myself and about the community and about, Te Ao Māori. And it just made a huge difference to me working as a nurse. I thought, why haven't I done this before? Why haven't I looked at maramataka? Why haven't I looked at how things grow and what things can do and for our well-being? So yeah, that's where it basically all started. And now I'm addicted, I'm hooked.
He oranga, no roto I te whenua, he oranga kei roto I te wai, kei roto I te moana, he oranga kei te rangi, ki te ngahere. Era oranga e mōhiu nei tātou, kei roto nei a tātou papakai, kei nui a tātou marae, kei roto ia hoki anga nui tonu. He alei te mea, te taha Pākehā, kei reira ko te timatanga me te mutunga, mo te oranga mo te tangata. Hei kei roto anu I ngā tikanga, roto I te whakapapa, roto I ngā maharatanga, roto I ngā kōrero, roto I ngā mate ki te tanga, roto I te wairuatanga. Kei reira ko te ao, ora, e anoho nei tāua te hunga tangata, tāua ko ngā tangata whakatupuranga o tēnei taimane.
Ka rongo ki te tai e, ta nungaru aki nei e, hoki anga tēnei.
Ka timata I te whakahoki, te hango te whenua ki ona tupu tutu. Alei te mea ka wahi o kia krahe kato te whenua, kei kona no te tehi wahanga, ka whakahaungia, ka whakaorangia te whenua ki ngā momo tupu, I ngā rongoā, ngā rau tupu rongoā nei, I ngā rākau tupu, me ngā mahi ngā kai. Ngā mahi ngā kai I timata I te tau ko pahure nei, ka roto I tēnei tau nei, ka haere ngā rāo tuwiki, haere ki te hauhake, ka haere ki te tikeitu e tehe ngā kai, e tehe ngā kai ka homai mō ngā hui kone te marae nei, e tehe ngā kai ka maupiringa ki te kihinu te hoipere, hei kai tino ora mārika ngā kai nei, alei te me he kai tiki nātu, te wheketere tiki nātu rani te toa, aua kai ko tike, me te pani ki ngā momo rongoā, kia kaua pirau wawe ngā kai, e nei kai, mai te whenua, nā ka hore pau te hāwhe haura, ko haka maongi e ki roti te kihinu te hoipere, ka whāngai ati ngā kai mātua konei. No le ka liru ia rātu I te mauri tūturu, I roti I tēnei me te kai. Ko te ara rongoā, taua ara, mea ka karapotia, huri noa, I te katoa te hoipere nei. I tēnei wānei, kei te whakatō tonu nei, I ngā wahanga katoa tēnei ara hikoi, he ara tērā, hei whakaako I ngā tamari ngā mokopuna, he ara no tērā mo te hunga ka noho mai ki te hoipere, me wa rātou whānau, te tāmaka haere mai ngā whānau I te mei te kite ki te wa rātou tangata, e noho nei koni te hoipere, ka pute ki waho, e rote I nei rāni, ka kore rā te haere ki waho mo te moki noiho. Ka haere rā te ki waho, nā, ka tae te ki ngā kete, me ki ngā raurongoa nei, ka kore rā te moki, e kona rātou e kita ana, e whakapā ana, e tiro haerana, kei kona te aora, e mahi nei tāna mahi, pere te meni e whakapiti mai, I te mauri I te ora, kei roto e ratupu, hei whakaora, ka pā mai ki te tangata, ia ia hikoi ana, ia ia tiro ana, ka pā katoa te mauri, o era mea noho mauri ora mai nei, e runga, e te me ki wahora, I ngā pāti o te hoipere, nā kei reira, he momo rongo katoa te he momo wairua, whakapiki I te hininga o te tangata, e whakapiki nei te oranga ki roto I te tangata, he wāhi anō he tāma anō tērā, kia noho te tangata ki roto I i te oranga o te whenua. Te whenua e tupu ora nei, hala te me te whenua takoto nei, he klahe kato e kone, he klahe kato e kō. Engari he wāhi whakaora i te ako te whenua, na ke tupu anō i ngā momo e rākau, hala te me ke rite ki te ngāhere, engari ke rite ki te ngāhere. Nei te āhua o te pānga mai te mauri, ka mi te ki te hunga kata mai koni te hoipere, ha te kore mo te ki te o rā te whanaunga, ha te hana mai koni ki te noho, kei kone te ara rongoa, te hikoi nei te tangata hurino te hoipere, ka kite, ka pā, ka rongo, tērā momo oranga, na ke kone ki te hoipere. Ngā mahi rongoa nei, ngā mahi tikanga nei, noro te hokianga, ko timata, mā te ro te Ngā Tai e rua ki muri, ki te whakatoa haere, ki te whakaara, ki ro te ngā whakahaeringa te hoipere, te whakairihe ki ngā pāti te hoipere, ka mitu, ki te whakaako anō, ki ngā kai mai te hoipere, ki ngā rata, ki ngā nāhi, ki ngā kai whakahaere te hoipere, i ngā pāinga te rongo, i ngā pāinga ngā tikanga, i ngā pāinga o ngā kaupapa, whakaora tangata i raro i te maru o te rime te tikanga, te rime ngā kaupapa Māori, ngā kaupapa te kāinga.
The growth of the marakai, the ngahere, and what many would consider weeds, but in fact they are purposeful in supporting the growth of rongoā. So some, when they visit the huhipera, they might well expect to see a hospital with manicured gardens, with pathways that don't have any overgrown weeds, which is usually maintained with toxic chemicals. Minimising these toxic chemicals has been a big learning curve for our gardener and our contractors on site. We don't want toxic sprays here because of the what is grown here is also utilised for our rongoā.
Toro mai toringa kia hariru.
We grow organic kai for the kini, the hospital kitchen, and the whānau in need in our community. The hope is that we can just grow plentiful and abundant clean resources for the rongoā. Within this kaupapa, it's really about healing the whenua, healing the people at the same time. So we do that through just sharing knowledge and bringing and welcoming different people into the kaupapa. The walkway itself, we're growing trees and plants around the whole pathway around the hospital. We have reflection spaces, these whare that we plant flowers and fruit vines around. So it's really about making beautiful spaces in nature while we heal nature. We're diverting a lot of waste from the hospital, such as cardboard, paper, food scraps, the cut grass. We're making that into compost, into soil to grow our kai. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to grow good kai, to go up to the hospital kitchen, to our patients, and also to whānau in need out in our community. It's a really healing space in all senses of the word.
Main highlights. One is working in the mental health space and alongside a very skilled practitioner who was able to work with whaiora and whānau to really reframe and provide a different understanding of their experiences, and work alongside us as medical practitioners and nurses to really bring a calm and a sense of understanding of those experiences that really help people recover much better as a result of that. The other highlight for me has been some of the hui we've held that have really uncovered some of the deep bodies of knowledge and understanding about health and healthcare that are out in the community in the rongoā world, and some of the reasons and the understanding about how that's been quite hidden and at times has felt quite a lot of nervousness about bringing that forward, due to all sorts of histories, including colonisation and just feeling that it wasn't welcome in a Western medical healthcare space. And as we've had those hui and uncovered that, that's been really interesting and a real learning journey for me. I think some of the challenges have been around learning to understand and respect each other's perspective and the different learning traditions and the different understandings of what expertise is and how that gets acknowledged and how it's recognised. I think a lot of partnership and working in time, and those issues are not, those are real issues. They are quite different disciplines. So it's time to work those through and talk them through and gain an understanding of each other's worldviews and understandings of where expertise lies and how to acknowledge that and respect it and how we care for people. And I think also building an understanding that Rongoā is very much based on building people's own capabilities and own expertise to care for themselves and their whānau.
It was really, really quite successful and in some ways overachieved for, which is a great thing, for a number of our whānau.
It meant that I could extend my practice further and not just come from a Western medical side. I could explore alternative therapy with and offer that service to our people. There are a lot of people up here that prefer alternative remedies, so Rongoā just fits in perfectly with the community in the Hokianga. Yeah, and so because I've done the training and I know what our taumata Rongoā have to offer, again, like I've said before, I will refer them to the services we have. It was a surgical procedure that went terribly wrong where I ended up with a fractured acetabula. So I'm still recovering from that operation, but whilst I was a patient here at Hauora Hokianga, I would have our taumata Rongoā team come up and provide miri for me, Reiki, and I found that really beneficial.
Once we started, we'd recognised that people wanted it and we could see the benefits. We've got 12 residents here who live here permanently. We also sit alongside our acute hospital, and throughout COVID we've been giving them wairako every day, and we've had very little illness amongst any of them, and I mean even normal coughs and colds.
But when we used to do health promotion when I first started here and you were out in the community doing your promotion, everything was paper, plastic. You know, you're giving away like those rubber wristbands and plastic keyrings and plastic pens, and everything was focused. But since we've had the rongoā introduced here at the hospital, we changed that whole kaupapa. We had rongoā plants and veggie seedlings and everything like that was sustainable and from here and could actually make a difference to whānau. So that was probably one of the most exciting things for me.
Rongoā stands on its own. Rongoā is not alternative or complementary, it is rongoā. So we still have some learnings around that co-location or partnership or integration and how we work together in that space. But I believe the future is bright, and I'm really optimistic, particularly in terms of the health system changes, where the Māori Health Authority has already flagged and indicated their commitment to rongoā services and the development of. So at the end of the day, in essence, our whānau do benefit and will benefit from the best of both worlds.
Me kia mahi ngā kaupapa miri nei i ngā rā katoa te wiki. Hale te mea kororona ki te mani ki te prairi ngā wiki na katoa. Me te tautoko i ngā mahi o ngā kaironga ki rote ngā takiwa, rote ngā hapua te kāinga. Kia hono atu, ki aua kai mahi ki ngā whanaunga i tēni wā, ni mahi rongo ana rātu roto rātu kāinga. Āwhina ki manaki tiana i o rātu mai, o rātu hapu. Nā ki te tautoko katoa i ngā mahi nei a rātu. Nā ko ngā whanaunga ka hiehia ngā kaupapa rongoā. Kia kaua haere mai te hoipiri, ngā ka tona ki rātu, ki haere rātu ki o rātu anō whanaunga mahi nei, ngā mahi rongo ki roto rātu i takiwa. I te whakatupu ake, amu te mātauranga, me te tini atu, me te mahatunga mātauranga o tātou mātua, tātou tūpuna. Nā, te taha ki te māramataka, te taha ki te whakapakari i tīnana, ki te whakatau te tangata i anō. E rawa mō kaupapa. I tā mea kōpū mai te mā, mai te whānutanga mai te mā, me he nui rawa ngā kaupapa. Hauora nei, kei kona i roto ngā tikanga tātou mātua, kei kona ngā whakauta, kei kona ngā kaupapa hei manaki.
Some of the goals and aspirations that I have for our people and for our hospital is to find a place where our clinical whānau and ourselves can walk side by side, so that our Western medicine and our Rongoā Māori find a place to work together, so that our whānau can assert their mana and become self-healers and have options.
People that come in can have dual consultants. They get fully informed of different ways that they can look after their own health.
I'd like to see us having a full-time Rongoā practitioner within the hospital. I'd like to see a Rongoā practitioner sit alongside GP clinics. So there's actually a GP, a nurse and a Rongoā practitioner, and people can come and choose the pathway they want to take. And that's a way to wellness.
Also to have the natives back on the grounds of the hospital as well, as a place that becomes like a learning place for people, as well as a harvesting place, as well as a place of just a whole vibration, I guess, of well-being at the hospital itself, so that the place becomes a place of wellness, rather than sickness. Yeah.
Inside and out.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to make sure that our skills of Rongoā Māori are opening our doors to a brighter future for our Māori whānau within Aotearoa. Making sure that that te tiriti or waitangi is incorporated in this. Tino rangatira is incorporated in the whole wairua of Rongoā Māori, but making sure that our whānau Māori are using rongoā.
We're at a point now where we're looking at the sustainability of the service, the continued funding and support that DHB gives to our communities to make sure it continues.
I'm really proud of our whānau here in Hokianga, because we have been a big part of the resurgence of Rongoā Māori and definitely leading on the forefront. We know that our future is very bright. Rongoā Māori is here to stay, and it's going to be an amazing future. Ngā mihi.
Nōri re he, o le hala tēne te huarahi hou, engari ko i tēne ko te huarahi, ko tahuri mai te hoipere, ka ngā kanui tēne te hoipere tēne wānei, ke hikoi ngā tahi ai. Ai roto I ngā kaupapa tūpune, ngā kaupapa Māori kororo tēne, ka miti me tā kotanga o ngā kaupapa Pākehani, haere ngā tahi anu. Whai yo ka tau kia koe papa te anu kūnau tamatoa te atea whenua kura tū aururi whai yo. Tui ia whiria te hera tapu, tui ia whatua te here ora paua, ka toko nei te pō, paua ka toko nei te ao. He ora tupua, he ora tapito, he ora nau e yo matua e. Aka maua te ha manu ora ki te tai o te rangi paka maua te ha manu ora ki te tai o te whenua paka maua te ha manu ora ki te tai o te moana paka maua te ha manu ora ki te tai au nau e yo te wai ora. Rui ai te kore tō I te pō tupu I te pō ka ua te a. Ko ia te mauri ora ka puta ki te wai au ki te ao marama. Ara mai te toki e ka mia hui e tai ki e.
Nei rā te mihi kia koutou e hauora Hokianga e. Mo e nei taonga koutou I tākoto te ara. Ngā o ngā taonga no tua whakarere I runga I te whakaro kotahi e. Kia koutou. Kia koutou, hei oranga te whenua, e oranga hoki te muka tangata e, tēnā korua, tēnā rā koutou.
Te hā koe, mai kore ake koe, hei whakarehu I tēnei kōrero nui, te whānui hoki o te kaupapa e whakatakotoria e koutou. It was wonderful to see what was described as the vibration of wellness and how broad that was. I know that there were emotional moments that you could perhaps predict in terms of Nehi saying how she felt about it, but also just in seeing our people engaging in Rongoā Māori and learning and recovering and reclaiming. Ka titia ki te ngākau, ka pupu ake ngā kare aroto. And this is something I don't need to say to all of you because this is your space and this is your place, but I'm sure you're joining me in celebration of what happened. Work together and aim for that vibration. Kia maumahara ai tātou, just so that we all remember, in the live Q&A chat, you can put questions in there at any point. So if that gave you some pātai in terms of how things were done, what were the processes, what do we need to know if we're considering all of those pathways and opportunities, then you can do that in the live chat, and that will happen after our kai kōrero this afternoon, and then we'll come together in our panel. Engari naine e karema, ka huri tātou ki te kai kōrero e whai ake nei, John Whanga, no Ngāti Rākai Pāka, Ngāti Kahungunu, Ngāti Rongo Mai Wahine. John Whanga is the Deputy Director General for Māori Health at Te Manatū Hauora, the Ministry of Health. John began his career in the Department of Conservation in 1989, working on Treaty of Waitangi policy and negotiations, before moving on to the Ministry of Education, the Māori Education Group, in 1991. John originally joined the Ministry of Health in 1993 as a foundation member of the then newly established Māori Health Directorate, Te Kite Hauora. John then spent 6 years working in the ministry, culminating in management roles in both public health and Māori health as the manager of Te Kite Hauora. Then after leaving the ministry, John took up a number of significant roles in tertiary education, including as Chief Advisor, Wānanga, Tertiary Education Commission, Deputy Chief Executive, Te Wānanga o Aotearoa, and Chief Operating Officer, Taratahi Institute of Agriculture. Kare no kia mutu, maha te mahi a te tangata nei, te rangatira nei. In 2018, John was acknowledged in Parliament for his work in successfully negotiating a $100 million Treaty of Waitangi settlement for ngā iwi me ngā hapu o te rohe o te wairua. This was the culmination of over 30 years of work. And in 2019, John returned to the Ministry of Health to lead the Māori Health Directorate as Deputy Director General of Māori Health. Can mātauranga Māori and science safely and respectfully coexist in the health and disability space? Tēnei te pātai, tēnei te kaupapa te kōrero a te rangatira nei, e piki nei ki te pai kōrero tēnā koe, John.
Tēnā koe, Stacey, o te atu rā, tēnā koutou katoa. Tēnei au te hōkai nei o te tapu ai. Te hōkai nuku, te hōkai rangi, te hōkai nei a tō tipuna atu matauinga. A tū kariri, a tū kaniwha, a tū kaitaua. Taku tapu ai, ko tapu ai nui a tāne. I piki te ai ki te rangi tū hā ki te hio manano. I roko hina atu rā ko ngā kete o te wānanga. Ko te kete tuauri, ko te kete tuatea, ko te kete aronui. Ka tiritiri a ka pau a ki papatu ānaku. Ka puta te ratangata ki te whai ao ki te ao marama. Hui te marama, hui te ora e. E aku rangatira tēnā koutou. Me ki Ngā Tai e whae whakaraui ka ai a wairua, a rorohiko nei ki tō tāte nei huhuinga, tō tāte nei kaupapa whakaraui ka heha tērā ko te oranga tonutango o tō tāte iwi. E tika ana ko te wā o matariki tēnei, matariki hunga, matariki a hunga nui. Ko te wā tēnei o te tau, ka te tiro whakamuri, ki ngā mahi ko oti nei tātau i te tau ko pahure, o te atu rā ki te mihi atu ki te hunga i mahi anei ki te hunga ka rere atu ki tō pairau. O te atu rā ki te whakarautaki i te anga whakamua. Nā reira me tika me mihi atu ki ngā mate huhua o te wā o tātou me te whakaaro ki a rātou moi mai rā oki ai. Ko rātou ki a rātou, ko tātou nā waihotanga ake rā o rātou, tēnā no tātou katoa. Ko mau kai te maunga, ko waitiro hea pūpū rere ana ki nānu haka te awa. Ko Ngāti Rākai Pāka nā whare rau o te tahinga o te rā, ko Ngāti Kahununu, ko Ngāti Rongo Mai Wahine ngā iwi. Ko te wakatapu o tā ki tumu, ko kura hau po ngā waka. E aku rangatira tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou i rungi te harikoa. Ko hui ai tātou i rungi tēnei kaupapa motu hake. Ko te mātauranga Māori kātahi, ko te anga whakamua o te Rongoā Māori kārua. Me te whakaaro, ko te motu hake tanga o enei kaupapa kei te pupuri, kei te whakarewa nei tātou. Ko te titiro ki ngā mahi e mahi anei me te hononga atu ki o tātou nei tipuna, me te titiro whakamuri ki nā rā kei te neke mai. Nā reire aku raurangatira mā tēnā no koutou katoa. First of all, I need to make a declaration. I'm usually very well managed by one of my staff, Eli Toeke. Unfortunately, Eli's away today, or hasn't been too well. And so he's allowed me the opportunity to try and manage myself through this presentation. And I want to acknowledge the work that Eli's undertaken in both Mātauranga Māori and with our Rongoā whanaunga and our Rongoā colleagues. I want to make some observations around Mātauranga Māori and science. I do want to talk a bit about the direction forward for the ministry in Māori health. And also take the opportunity to contribute to what I see as a wānanga today. Now, I've got to do there we go. Hopefully you can see my presentation at the moment. And two, how do I do full screen? Okay. I obviously wasn't listening. See, this is where Leo here. Now, yeah. From beginning like that? Okay, kia ora. Thank you. I think the first of those things, if we're looking at Mātauranga Māori and science, what is science? Wikipedia is as good a place to go and find a definition of science as anything else. And this is what it says: the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. What is the difference between scientific study and clinical practice in health? Well, as you can see there, scientific study is much more around the kind of the pathology or causes. If we're looking at things like disease, for instance, rather than the clinical practice, which is really about diagnosis, prognosis, therapy, and how you might address those things. What is Mātauranga Māori? That's something I think we will all continue to contribute to. It has been comparatively described as Indigenous knowledge, as an Indigenous knowledge system that incorporates Māori philosophical thought, worldview and practice. Ka hore tangata I hangaia I puta no mai rānei kia noho wehe I tēnei ao a hakoa matangaro ka rangono te Māori. Nothing in this world was created or simply emerged to exist in isolation. Even the invisible can be detected by its impact on something else. What is Rongoā Māori? Might be a bit provocative of me to put out a definition, but certainly in terms of the work we've done with Rongoā Māori practitioners, it is very much about a Māori way of being, doing and knowing to preserve and heal te taiao, including tangata, to achieve balance and sustain Māori and wairua. And as the presentation from Margaret and Hauora Hokianga showed, Rongoā Māori is not just, if we were to compartmentalise it as we often do in health services, it's not just about providing things that might help us get better. It is a way of interacting with the world. It is a way of understanding how all the different parts of te ao and te taiao come together, including ourselves, and how you might find some balance and sustainability amongst those. A question I got asked to consider is Mātauranga Māori science? Alternatively, is science part of Mātauranga Māori? I got asked some months ago off the back of, I think, a letter that was sent by some academics, I think in Auckland University, questioning whether or not Mātauranga Māori should be viewed in the same basis as science. My response to the question of is Ngā Te Ranga Māori science is no, nor does it need to be considered in that light. Ngā Te Ranga Māori has its own mana. In the same way that science and scientific thinking, I would argue, has its own mana. They are not the same things. They do not have the same origins. They have different ways of generating evidence, insights, and knowledge. But both of them have mana. And more importantly, as we move ahead in the South, in this world, both of them have the potential to provide opportunities for us, to provide services, and to provide for our people. Can Ngā Te Ranga Māori and science work together? Yes. But I think important in that, there are several things that will need to happen. First of all, Ngā Te Ranga Māori has not been privileged in our country or in our past in the same degree and in the same way that science has. And we need to account for that. In the same way we currently privilege, and we need to privilege Māori views and iwi views of health and social services, for instance. We do that because they have not been privileged in the past. They have not been given the respect they need or should be accorded to. So yes, they can work together, but it must be authentic. It needs to occur in a way that doesn't allow for compromise. It does need to respect and preserve the whakapapa and integrity of Ngā Te Ranga in order for us to move in confidence. But I certainly have a strong view that Ngā Te Ranga Māori and science have the ability to add to each other, to help each other flourish in ways that might benefit our communities and our people. In the same way that I don't believe our tupuna close their eyes, their minds, or their hearts to different ways of doing things. In the same way, we, as far as I look at, need to provide opportunities to not only embrace Ngā Te Ranga Māori, but to look for opportunities where other knowledge, including science, might contribute to ameliorating the circumstances of our people and providing them with opportunities to grow and flourish moving forward. I don't believe that Ngā Te Ranga Māori should operate in a cocoon where it is somehow stopped from engaging with and being informed, as I said, authentically by other knowledge and other understandings. I think the opportunity to grow and expand Ngā Te Ranga Māori, we can see through the generations of children currently coming through and young people coming through who are not only confident in Te Ao Māori, but are also confident to be citizens of the globe and draw on both those strengths in terms of finding destinations way forward for them. The treaty is a good example of where we might find two ways of doing and knowing that can work in partnership. The ministry certainly has a big challenge in terms of meeting its treaty responsibilities, and it's worth pausing in there to recognise that the ministry's responsibilities in relation to Rongoā Māori and indeed to Ngā Te Ranga Māori are not just in relation to our current focus on equity and addressing the significant, pervasive and persistent inequities that our people face. There is also an obligation under Te Tiriti o Waitangi that the government has to protect and enable Ngā Te Ranga Māori so that Māori are able to exercise authority over their own health and well-being. Our support for Rongoā Māori from the government side is not just because it has the opportunity to help us address significant Māori health inequities, and it can, and it will do, but also because we have an obligation more broadly to support Ngā Te Ranga Māori, to support the emergence of Māori ways of doing things, to support Māori to be able to look after and provide for themselves, and more importantly, I think, provide an opportunity for us to develop Aotearoa solutions. By that I mean that Ngā Te Ranga Māori and Rongoā Māori has the ability to not only contribute to Māori aspirations in terms of hauora and well-being, but to also provide an insight and an understanding as to how the whole country might embrace Ngā Te Ranga Māori to develop solutions that are grounded in Aotearoa. In the same way that most recently we have celebrated Matariki as a public holiday, I find that a much more valid and authentic way for us to demonstrate our connection to Aotearoa than celebrating the fact that an Englishman some 400 years ago went to blow up Parliament called Guy Fawkes. And somehow that's come into our into our national consciousness as something that we should be celebrating. I'm not saying that that wasn't an important event in the history of England, but is it an important event in the history of Aotearoa, New Zealand? I don't think so. In terms of that partnership approach and drawing on Mātauranga Māori in terms of understanding, as I said, the treaty provides an opportunity to understand and utilise more than one lens of understanding about responsibilities, citizenship, and in the case of the world we work in, hauora. Whakamaua, the current Māori Health Action Plan draws extensively on that treaty understanding. And importantly, of the 4 priority areas as we move forward, fully embracing, acknowledging and utilising Mātauranga Māori is one of those 4 big areas of focus and investment for us currently and for the next decade. As I said, not just because Mātauranga Māori and Rongoā Māori provides an opportunity for us to support the ability, the capacity and capability of Māori to provide for themselves, to consider hauora and well-being in their own terms, and then to provide those things they need to address that. I think it provides an opportunity for Aotearoa New Zealand to be part of a process and to be part of things that will, as I said, ground us in this country. In terms of some final messaging around, and my particular focus, to stress again, Mātauranga Māori is not science, nor does it need to be. It has its own mana, it has its own place, it has its own right. Are there opportunities through the authentic consideration of both Mātauranga Māori and science to provide insights, to provide understandings that will ultimately allow us to do better things for our communities? Yes. I stress, though, it's really important that there's a recalibration, because Mātauranga Māori has not been privileged in the past, and we still have some work to do to make sure it is given and accorded, as we do with Rongoā, the respect that it deserves, the place that it deserves, not only now but in the future of our country. I would in fact argue that Mātauranga Māori already influences and is already part of a number of areas of our country where we are slowly inching towards, as I said, thinking about ourselves as grounded in Aotearoa. The way we utilise Māori concepts and terms and words more generally shows that. But also in health, we have adopted Mātauranga Māori views of health and wellbeing. We have utilised Mātauranga Māori in the development of health services. We've utilised Mātauranga Māori in thinking about how best we should engage with iwi and Māori and communities. We've utilised Mātauranga Māori in thinking about what those outcomes and objectives are that we need to move towards as we move forward. And it's important that we continue to do that. My final observation, given that this is Matariki, is an observation made by a Lebanese philosopher called Khalil Gibran, who said in his seminal work, The Prophet, that it's good for us in these periods like this to rest in reason so that we can move with passion. Me whakatai te whai whakaro kia anga whakamua I rungi te wana. At this time, I think it's worthwhile us reflecting on the opportunities that Mātauranga Māori can provide in leading us forward to develop and ground us in Aotearoa solutions. And I look forward to working with yourselves and others across indeed the system as we continue that journey and look at the opportunities that will bring for us to expand and grow not only Mātauranga Māori, to develop Aotearoa solutions, but to do that in a way that's respectful and authentic. Nā reira, koe ara noi ho aku kōrero e oku rangatira. E harita mea, kei rotu I ahau te māramatanga katoa, te mōhiotanga katoa, engari mo te wānanga nei. Kia whiua atu au e nei kōrero, hei koe I te hinengaro, hei whai whakaro mā tātou katoa, kia hati ai, kia anga whakamua tātou, I rungi te tika I te pono. Nā reira, e aku nui, aku rahi, aku whakatamarahi ki te rangi. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Tēnā koe, John. te whānui hoki o whakaro, te maha o whiako, e whāngai hia nā kia mātou I tēnei rā. If it's okay with you, could I just ask a couple of questions, because everyone today has been right on Māori time, which is of course very onto it and early and a little bit efficient this morning. And I will ask a question that you might not have had time to see this morning. What do we need to be mindful of when it comes to perhaps building into legislation practices and ways of protecting Rongoā Māori? Hea o kupu aki kia tātou. What do we need to consider?
Well, look, I think the first thing we need to consider is we need to do is we need to engage substantially with our Māori practitioners and our Māori experts in this area. It's really important. Given the previous history of Crown lawmaking and its negative impact, not the least being the Tohunga Suppression Act in the past, it's really important that we don't repeat that mistake into the future. So it's really important that we engage quite carefully with our experts and our people who we acknowledge as leaders in this field. At the moment, there is an opportunity with the therapeutics legislation, for instance, to look at how we might purposefully provide further protection, legal protection, around Rongoā Māori. Now, while there is an opportunity there to do two things, to acknowledge more properly in New Zealand law the place of rongoā and to do that authentically, we need to do that in a way that doesn't cut across the ability for Mātauranga Māori and Rongoā Māori to be authentic. And I think at the moment, that's why we're particularly engaging with our rongoā whānau to make sure that we can, one, understand what the issues are, two, move forward in a way that protects things in a way that makes sense and that is appropriate. And the law is only one mechanism to do that. There's a very strong view that there are things that should not be incorporated into law, for instance.
Tēnā koe. Ia koe kōrero ana mo taua kaupapa, when you're speaking of the Tohunga Suppression Act, do you think kua hoho te rongo recognise what that did to us? Do you think kua ea, have we actually looked at that suppression and what that creates in terms of ongoing racism, bias, disbelief in Māori practices?
No, I think we have to continue to look at that. And again, that's something where the government, so I'm talking here as a government employee and a public servant, where the government, including myself, needs direction from our people, because the mamai wasn't felt by government. The hurt, the loss was not felt by government. The impact was not felt by government. It was felt by our people, our experts, our tohunga, our communities. And we must make sure as we move forward that we are informed, by that I mean government, that we are informed on that, so that we can know what it is we need to address with the assistance, I might add, and with the guidance of our rongoā whānau. What we can't do is assume that everything is going to be within the ambit of government and what it needs to do. We have a partner here that has a role that we have not appreciated in the past and we have not provided for. And we need to go back to first principles. Me tingata I te kōrero, I te wānanga, I te tuatai. Ki taku kraua, ko te take e rua nā taringa o te tangata ko tahi te waha, te nui ngō ngā wā, me noho koe ki te rongo. Koe ana tana kōrero, he said, you got 2 ears and a mouth for a reason. You need to be listening twice as much as you talk. And I think that's most probably a seminal lesson for myself and other people in government.
Tēnā koe. We had Iana Manuel speaking to us this morning, and when it comes to the new Māori Authority, which has a new name, which we will find out very soon, she teased us with that. He mea hō mai, nā ngā tohunga. When we speak to the new ways of being and what the Māori Health Authority will look like, how do you feel about how the comms have been on that? Do you think people understand? How do we make sure that whānau are engaged with what things look like from July the 1st?
I think there's an ongoing job for all of us, both the ministry, the Māori Health Authority, Health New Zealand, the new Public Health Agency, for instance. We need to provide a lot of information, particularly in the first 3 to 6 months, so people do understand what the different roles and responsibilities are. There's a huge breadth of work we need to do in Māori health. And there are significant roles that the Ministry, the Māori Health Authority, Health New Zealand and others play in that. I think one of the critical things, Stacey, is not assuming that everything that's to do with Māori health is going to sit with the Māori Health Authority. That is not the case, nor should that be the case. The majority of our people, for instance, do not access by Māori for Māori service provision. Many of them do not have that choice. There is a majority of our people who access services through hospitals, GP clinics, other mainstream services, and we must make sure that those services are safe and appropriate. At the same time, we need to be working, and we are already working alongside the Māori Health Authority, for instance, to build the capacity and capability of Māori to provide for themselves, to articulate their own directions, to be involved in setting the planning and that around that, and then to be involved potentially as service deliverers or people who will commission and engage with communities to move that forward. So there's a huge task there, but I think my number one message around that is everybody in the health system has a responsibility for Māori health. And that's really important that we get alongside that. We do not take the view that somehow this all belongs to the Māori Health Authority. It doesn't. We all have a responsibility. By we, I'm talking about all the government partners in health. We have a responsibility to make sure we're delivering on Māori health. And on the other side, there's a big work program for all of us to be delivering on in that regard.
Kia ora. So speaking to what you brought up in your kōrero then is rongoā to be taken across the board as well. If we know that a lot of Māori don't necessarily engage in by Māori for Māori, is that a further expectation when we experience the new rollout and the new structure?
Yep. I think there's more than one way to expand and embrace Mātauranga Māori and Rongoā Māori. So one of those is the delivery of services or hauora services or health services. That's only one way. There are other ways that we can incorporate Māori views of thinking about hauora and well-being. There are other ways and there are other lessons, I think, for both by Māori and for Māori service provision and indeed mainstream service provision around how to engage safely with people, utilising Mātauranga Māori and Rongoā Māori, for instance. So I take a view that there's more than one way for Mātauranga Māori and Rongoā Māori to influence health outcomes, health thinking, and what we actually do in health. Only one of which is the contracting and delivery of health services, for instance.
Kia ora. I think, as we heard in our first kōrero this afternoon, a whole vibration of wellness. Ne? Aha koa kaihea te tangata, aha koa heha o nā whiako i te ao hauora. So tēnā rawa atu koe, John, and thank you for agreeing to stay with us because I know that people will have great questions for you and you're good at answering them. And I like the fact you don't deflect. So remember, everybody, you can put those questions in now because we will have more time after our kai kōrero e whai ake nei. So live Q&A is the place to do that. Ka tahi tātou ka wānanga no. He tika tau, John, he wānanga kei te haere. Ka mutu kua tino whāngahia mātou ki te kai a te rangatira tēnei ka mihi. I nei karema. Ka huri te titiro ki tētahi whaia atahua o tātou ko Donna Kerridge. No Ngāti Tahinga, no Ngāti Mahuta, Donna's professional life has encompassed a successful IT career in which she contracted for major New Zealand corporate and government initiatives, the study of Western health science and Rongoā Māori, to consultancy for ACC and the Ministry of Health. Having worked with whakauai research, and she is sending me some rongoā for my mare as well. For several years as a research participant, Donna was contracted as a researcher to the Ao Rauropi project in 2021. Donna is a respected, traditionally trained Rongoā Māori practitioner. She's one of the stars of Nuku Women, the book. She's inspirational in her light She has more than 20 years of experience. She also serves as the contracted negotiator for the national body of Rongoā practitioners. I know that she reached out to me and mena ka pātai mai a donna e kore rawa. E whakahe noku ke te Waimari e kia tuku mihi ki a koe te whaia, achieving success alongside our allies in the Rongoā space. Nau mai, whakapiki mai.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Stacey. I'm so grateful that you're here with us today. It feels wonderful. So thank you, and I'm sure that you will get well soon. So tēnā koutou te whānau. What an awesome day. I've learnt some new kupu for our kōrero as we go. Trailers, māuitanga. It makes me so proud to be Māori in the company of our rongoā whānau. So, and for us all to be able to come together like this. I look at the team at Hokianga and it makes me just want to burst. I've seen the struggles along the way, and it's been decades in the making, and it'll probably take even more to sustain it. To hear our DDG, Māori Health Directorate, talk to the opportunities the treaty presents in terms of recognition, protection, and in particular enablement. Ngā mihi ki a koe, John. And the need for us to retain our authenticity. These are the things that worry us, that worry rongoā practitioners, that, you know, somebody's going to try and make us change shape, and then we won't be true to who we are and to our tupuna. But I guess to start off with, this symposium really has been tupuna driven. It's a tupuna driven kaupapa. We are all the living faces of our tupuna, and we are quite simply the end of a very long line of greatness, continuing what our ancestors set in place all those years ago. As rongoā practitioners and pukenga, you are the carriers of our Indigenous healing knowledge for those who will one day need it. As our health and disability sector and health professionals struggle to be able to do the things that they've trained long and hard to do, to access the resources they need these days, the time has come for us. The time has come for our rongoā kaimahi and pukenga to shift the current, to apply your skills to make a material difference to our health equity landscape alongside our allies. Our tupuna have agitated for more than a century for change, for shared understanding, to stimulate our senses so that we might reach our potential. Our tupuna would have welcomed the choices that we have available to us but failed to take advantage of. The ability to make our hospitals places of healing for all, to help our health professionals understand us and us them, and for rongoā to stand in its own mana once again in the eyes of all New Zealanders. For Māori to be well, we must first be allowed to be Māori, at home, on our marae, at work, and in business. And only then can the rest of the people feel safe to bring their whole selves, with their different faiths, ethnicities, hopes, and aspirations, to the table to help solve the challenges we all share in a modern world. The land and the people are becoming more unwell, as Par alluded to in his talk earlier this morning. Many of you will have seen The Paradox of Our Age, and there seems to be some debate over who the author is, but I think it sums things up perfectly for the way we are today. It goes a little bit like this. We have bigger houses but smaller families, more conveniences but less time. We have more degrees but less sense, more knowledge and less judgment, more experts but more problems, more medicines and yet more helplessness. We have been all the way to the moon and back, but we have trouble in crossing the street to meet our neighbour. We've built more computers to hold more copies than ever, and yet we have less real communication. We've become long on quantity and short on quality. These are the times of fast foods, but slow digestion, tall men and short characters, steep profits and shallow relationships. It's a time when there is much in the window and nothing in the room. The only reason Rongoā still exists today is because it works. If it didn't, it would have died a natural death a long time ago. My koro would not have passed it on if it didn't work. We would not have seen the thing and come to learn the things in our time if it didn't work. We know Rongoā is not a cam, not a complementary or alternative medicine. We know that it's more than lotions and potions and miri. And we know that it shares an intrinsic relationship with the natural world. Rongoā is an approach to health and well-being practices, as John said, based on a Māori worldview, guided by respective hapu and whānau customs, tikanga and mātauranga Māori. I think it's important that we don't forget where our strength comes from, and that is our hapu. Rongoā Māori is an approach that focuses on well-being, not on disease. You know, we're not doctors and we don't want to be doctors. We have our own kaupapa. We also recognise the things that hold us back from healing. It's not anti-Western medicine. In fact, it's really supportive of it. Each and every one of us is likely to be grateful for the gift of modern medicine at some point in our lives. Rongoā Māori is inclusive. It engages the whānau in our healing journeys. It uses a framework that is more inviting and more familiar to our Māori, and it engages a multiplicity of techniques, karakia, bodywork, listening and talking, encouraging self-responsibility, plant medicines, pūrākau, sharing our stories, taonga pūoro, the sounds of nature, our arts, rāranga, all to help empower whānau to achieve their healing potential. In my experience, people use Rongoā because it works for them. They feel listened to and respected. And we are often local. They feel safe to share their stories with us. They know us as part of their community. Some of them want to come off their medications, especially those that create new problems for them. And we can help walk alongside them as they navigate that. And we combine our care to get the best possible outcomes for our people. In my experience, those that use Rongoā are mostly Māori, but also others. Our elders are drawn to our Rongoā. They feel less comfortable in the Western health system and more comfortable amongst our own. I've heard our mamas say that they are being judged in the Western health system, less so in a Rongoā Māori circle. Other people who use our services are those that are disadvantaged or whakamā about their situation and don't feel they can talk freely and frankly to other health professionals. A lot of people who come and see us, sadly, are victims of domestic violence and sexual abuse. And then there are those that feel marginalised by the system. These are the people that we most see at our doors. I know for many people there's real concern about how can we tell that a practitioner is safe. You know, our Rongoā practitioners don't have a Western tohu as such. So how do we know? And, you know, I had to think about how is it that our tupuna managed this? And how did they know that people were safe? And I think that, you know, we measure safety based on the reputation of the Rongoā practitioner. How long have they been around in one community? Who did they train with? How they trained? And for how long? We're not looking for weekend warriors here. Do they have the backing of their community leaders who will attest to their safety, scope of practice, and skill levels? What is their track record for delivery and willingness to refer when their needs require, when things are outside of our scope of practice? For me, these are the things that tell us a practitioner is safe. The people who are supported by their community, the people who have their community at heart, the people who trained and grew among their community. A tohu and a degree is no guarantee for safe practice. We can all find examples of that if we want to look there. But the job is not done. The Crown's response to Y262 is long overdue. why 2575 is still very much top of mind for all of us. There is still much to be done to realise the aspirations of whakamāua that John referred to, te pai tāwhiti. And next week, the Pai Ora Healthy Futures Act comes into force. Not to mention the replacement for the Medicines Act, the Therapeutic Products Bill, still sits high on the horizon for us. In my view, Minister Little and the Cabinet have agreed to revise and should be praised for the revision of the Medicines Act and to go and re-look at the Therapeutic Products Bill, among other things, provide for the protection and recognition of Rongoā Māori. This is truly progress, and we acknowledge Minister Little for his direction on this matter, but it comes with significant challenges. We heard from Eldon today about the ACC Rongoā services, alongside with the expansion of the Māori Health Directorates and now the Māori Health Authority Rongoā contracts. They've breathed new life and perceived public credibility into Rongoā. So many more health professionals, Western health professionals, are talking and wanting to learn about Rongoā Māori. The community are asking more questions about Rongoā Māori. And we also see the vultures circling, the people who all of a sudden have changed the name of their practice from whatever it was to tack on Rongoā Māori to the end. After years of working on the down low, the biggest risk to Rongoā Māori is finding enough authentic healers who are prepared to work outside their own whānau circles, to train or to supervise others to help meet this exponential growth in demand. Rongoā practice has been depleted for years. Just read the Y262 report. Our ability to scale services quickly without compromising safety is a significant challenge for us all, and we all need to gather together to help make that happen. It's no good for us to be tearing each other apart in order to clamber for the biggest contract or whatever may be on the horizon. We have to work together. We have to work together if we are to do the things we are destined to do and to serve those who seek our help. This day is whiro, as Rihanna referred to in our maramataka. And this symposium has long been planned for this date. It is no mistake that we sit on the cusp of Matariki rising, under a whiro moon, and upon an incoming tide at sunrise. Ngā Tai pariata. Whiro brings high tides and a time for quiet contemplation and reflection. Our old people use this time for healing. Ngā Tai pariata brings forward new energy. This combination of factors reflects a very special opportunity. It is time to prepare for soaring energies and the new era that is ahead. For eons, it was tikanga that governed the practice of rongoā. And then the treaty came along and secured it for all time in Article 2. If you look at our diagram there and follow it around to the right, you'll see, but then came along, or the left, depending on whether I'm looking at a reflection, but along came the Tohunga Suppression Act, which actually, what that act did, in my understanding, is that it denied any claims with regard to the spiritual components of rongoā practice. It wasn't about our rongoā rākau. It was about our ability to prophesize, our ability to use maramataka to predict the future. That was what the Tohunga Suppression Act was about. It was about taking away that aspect of our practice of Rongoā Māori that connected us to Wairua. The next cab off the rank in 1908 was the Quackery Prevention Act. And that waved goodbye to our ability to proclaim any health benefits derived from rongoā. That's what the Quackeries Act did in 1908. And just for good measure, we threw in the Medicines Act in 1981 to reinforce this. Now, I know that there will be many out there who would argue that that is not true. But I'm telling you, when the Medicine Act prevents me from saying this rongoā was traditionally used by my ancestors, when it makes that statement illegal, when it makes it illegal for me to put that on my website or on my labels, that is denying us the truth. How can we have legislation in this country that makes the truth illegal? So for all of us who talk about the Tohunga Suppression Act being a cornerstone in the demise of our practice, I think the Medicine Act actually has perpetuated that. And I welcome the review. I welcome the review of the Medicines Act. I welcome the opportunity under the Therapeutic Product Bill to fix those things that for more than 100 years have tried unsuccessfully to erode the mana and the mauri of Rongoā Māori. As part of all of this mahi that we're doing, I've had to think long and hard this week about what it is that I would have rongoā protected from. We talk about the recognition and the protection. Protection from what? And I had to really think hard so that I could be succinct in the mahi that I do. And when I thought about it, it came down to 4 things that I feel like I would like to see protection for Rongoā Māori from. And one of them, the number one, as John rightfully expressed, that is the interference from Crown. Rongoā Māori is a Māori kaupapa. It's not there to be interfered with by the Crown. The other thing that concerns me and why we need protection is protection against exploitation of our associated mātauranga. So often I hear other organisations claiming our mātauranga in the interest of promoting their own products and commercialism without any regard for the tikanga that underpins Rongoā Māori. The other thing that I think we need protection from is the exploitation and depletion of our natural resources used for our rongoā rākau and for further degradation thereof. You know, part of Rongoā Māori is making sure that our patient, as I think Pa referred to, that our first patient is always the whenua. And so it can't be Rongoā Māori if we're raping and pillaging. And the last aspect, which I've already talked about, is to make sure that we discontinue the disrespect and disregard for the mana and mauri of Rongoā Māori as understood by Māori. Perhaps now, with the new therapeutic product bill and with the support of Minister Little to recognise and to protect Rongoā Māori, it will once again be acceptable to all that Rongoā Māori be sustained by tikanga. So hopefully, with these rules that you see in the slide here, we started with tikanga, and maybe very, very soon we will be back with tikanga. The Therapeutics Products Bill is an opportunity to free rongoā from any intent to restrict or regulate its practice and recognise it for the taonga it is to be practised according to tikanga āhapu and cared for by those who practice it, with the support of the Crown rather than under the direction of the Crown. There are several ways in which these two worlds can exist, and John talked about that earlier, but there is only one way, in my view, in which they can both thrive. If you think about it, we could have 2 completely different silos. We could have rongoā here, and we could have Western medical practice over here, operating in complete isolation. Thankfully, that is not a reflection of how we live in Aotearoa. For Māori, we must walk in both worlds. And so that way of operating is probably never going to work for our people as we live today. The other way that we could do it is we could have 2 circles overlapping, 2 spheres, affording some level of control by the Crown over certain aspects of our rongoā. For example, maybe rongoā rākau. That overlaying bit in the middle that we say, oh, well, we'll just, the only bit that we really need to be mindful of is the practice of rongoā rākau, or our plant medicines. But actually, you know, as we all know, our medicines are not limited to plants. But, you know, and then we'll just manage how we may talk about those things and how and who we can supply it to. You know, the practice of rongoā, not just rongoā rākau, but the practice of rongoā is part and parcel of the preparation of rongoā rākau. They can't be separated. The health and safety of raw material harvesting, the supply, the way that we recommend people to use it, that's the practice of Rongoā Māori. And, you know, how we choose to do that is our business. Another world cannot assume control even of that little portion and still truthfully consider it to be rongoā. Or we could have a world where one sits inside the other, and we all know what that looks like. One completely consumed by the other, therefore only making it only free to exist at the behest of the dominant culture. So those three, for me, they're just not ways that rongoā can thrive, not at all. And if rongoā can't thrive, then our people can't, because this is all about our people at the end of the day. It's not about rongoā. It is about our people and the well-being of our people. So if I were to choose a way where the two worlds exist, for me, it would look more like this picture. And so if we think about, you know, nature and science, which is really what we're talking about here, Rongoā Māori and Western medicine, I would have a model where there was a bridge between the two, which would, for us, to enable both to stand in their own mana and mauri. You know, the last thing I want to do is to be admitted to hospital and to tell a surgeon, look, this is all good, I'm Māori, could you please just leave your science at the door when you come in, because, you know, I don't do science. When I want a surgeon, I want him to bring his whole self into that theatre. I don't want him to leave any part of it behind. Nor do I want a rongoā practitioner to have to leave their wairua at the door so that they can come and help our whānau. I want everybody to be able to bring their best game to the table. And for that to happen, we can't pretend to be each other, but we can build a bridge between the two of us. A bridge constructed of respect and appreciation for the gifts that diversity brings to the health and disability sector. A health and disability sector that is under pressure, and a population that is fast losing hope for better health outcomes. This model, for me, is the only one that reflects and honours the reality for many New Zealanders. It provides a pathway forward that gives effect to the Treaty of Waitangi and Te Tiriti. In order for that to happen, we must accept that any form of knowledge will only ever truly make sense within its own cultural context, and that science is not the only lens with which to view the world, nor is it the standard by which all other ways of knowing should be judged. With your food basket and mine, the people will thrive. This is an opportunity for us to thank special people for helping us to dream this event into being a long time ago. And in particular, I'd like to thank Whaia Marilyn Vareed, Mātua Ririata Makiha, and Pā Ropata, who gifted the symposium name and directed our focus to the two sessions that we've had today. Ka nui te aroha ki a koutou. I'd also like to thank those people, many who have spoken today, those with their crown hats on, and those freely wearing their pōtai. Our Māori research community, and of course our rongoā communities, who are working really hard together to ensure that Rongoā Māori is both recognised, enabled, and protected in legislation, and indeed, for the benefit of all New Zealanders. You are the true rangatira, weaving your people together in support of the advice sought from your allies. We're not there yet. Let's hope our wheels are securely fastened and that we can find a way that truly allows our respective ways of knowing and understanding this world to stand uncompromised in their own mana and mauri, as they richly deserve to be. It is people that deliver change, not organisations. But despite saying that, we must also recognise the organisations that have partnered to bring this symposium to you today. Never in a month of Sundays did I think that we would see the Crown and Māori working together to expand access to rongoā for our people and all New Zealanders. The Ministry of Health, Māori Health Directorate, ACC, Māori Health Services, or that we could have even 5 years ago hoped for a Māori health authority. Our rongoā whānau who are working at the coalface in the hospitals, our Māori researchers, Te Kāhui Rongoā, our national collective of rongoā practitioners. But I draw your attention to the fact that Te Kāhui Rongoā are not the only face of rongoā in this country. There are also others hard at work, quietly and unobtrusively ministering to our whānau at the coalface. Let us not forget them and all the work that they do as well. So whānau, stand up rongoā Māori. Stand ready for the soaring energies ahead of us all. Thank you all for your attention today and your attendance. I'm going to open the floor to questions, mainly because it's you that we want to hear from. And I think the people that have been here today have really given us a broad perspective from many different realms within the work. But I think what we see here is what Māori do best when we work together as whānau. We see events like this and other events, they cost a lot of money, but Māori have no trouble standing up an event with thousands of people, no putia, no venue, and we still overnight can be ready to manaaki at a tangihana without all of those things. We have a superpower whānau, and that is our whānau, and we shouldn't forget that. Everything that we need is within our reach, and we need to make it so. It's over to us now, whānau. So nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Mauri ora kia koe e te whaia, Donna, you got people. I can see it in terms of our emoji, in terms of people feeling that they really are, and we all are on the cusp of so many things. Tēnā koe e tō pānui ngā tohu, because understanding the tohu that come to us is one of your superpowers. And so thank you for bringing us together on this day as was meant to be. I'll just take your lead that you did want to answer a couple of questions, and I'll get our whole panel ready to answer questions that you can put in through the live Q&A. Engari pātai tuatahi nā Gillian kia koe Donna. Kia ora, we are on the cusp of collaborative research in whanganui primary health care. So what would you advise for bridging the space? Oh, look at her using all the terms you did. She listened well. Bridging the space between Tauiwi researchers and Māori researchers so that we practice authenticity without compromise?
Kia ora. That's a really awesome question, and sometimes I get really frustrated when researchers come to my whare and some of the things that I just take for granted as common courtesies kind of puts me on the wrong foot from the beginning. So I think it's important that our research community understand how it can work a little bit better. And there's guidelines out there. Whakawai Research have put out the SEALS guidelines. There are a few others that can help guide our researchers not quite comfortable. And, we shouldn't just always assume that just because you're Māori, you know these things. Just because I'm Māori doesn't mean I can sing, and I'm assure you I can't. So, let's not just think that that's for others as well. Using these guidelines helps keep us on track. And I know even in the rongoā space, having our kaumātua queer around to help support us in the mahi that we deliver, to kind of just knock us back into line again every time we step out of line. And some of us walk really well in two worlds. And sometimes we forget which world we're in. And we don't adjust as quickly as we should. So I think things like in the research space, making use of these guidelines that have been prepared with feedback from whānau who have experienced being the participants in research and what that's meant for them as Māori and how they felt being the participant, how that worked for them, and how do we make those outcomes reported as richly as the mātauranga was shared. So, yeah, I think make use of these things, whānau. If people aren't completely comfortable, then refer to them, use them. So, kia ora.
Kia ora. And just to refer to what Pa said this morning, you know, sometimes our kaumata will answer our questions with a question. Pātai atu ki ngā rākau, and kei reira te mātauranga. And they have that knowledge to help us find what we actually need to know. Ka mihi anō kia a koe, Margaret, kia ora. Hokianga Health, this is a pātai to you, and I know you have also, you're all there now, so kia koutou te wā. How much of the amazing kaupapa that you have created can be adapted in an urban environment, namely mahinga kai, mara, kai hauora, rongoā training under Health New Zealand, given the limited access to green spaces at the current sites, if we think about Auckland Hospital, Middlemore, North Shore and Waitemata. So that adaptation of this, you know, beautiful practice that we've seen you experiencing, and I must admit, I thought that too. I thought, oh, well, it's a beautiful hokianga, and it's so different from here, but it's relevant to kind of ask you how you could see, Hone Faith as well, how that could be adapted. E te rongo mai korua, Hone Faith, kei te rongo mai korua, can you hear me? And is Margaret still there?
Two other okay.
Or did you miss our question?
Aye.
Kei te pai, kei te pai. Hei whakarapopoto, basically when, you know, everyone looks at the beautiful kaupapa that you've created, how could we adapt that for urban settings? If we consider, I don't know if you know Middlemore and Auckland, but you can see it now, and Waitemata, when we take it out of hokianga, is there a way that you can inform whānau who are in more urban settings, how you could do that?
Te tahi tirohanga I te mea tamate titiro ki te kāinga, te whenua te kāinga noho krā he ana. Mā whenua te kāinga ka hore whai ngā here, ka hore whai pūhi ngā here nei. Me haere te tangata ki woho, ka titiro, hea ke ngā toi ngā whenua toi ana. Te mea kore tae koe ki te mea pākarukaru I tēne me te kohatu ko takota ki te kohatu ko te whenua ne. Tā haere koe ki woho, whakarongo. He aha kei te whakautu a woho. He hanga me ngaru ana. Hale te mea ka whakatūtunga ngā momo, pare ngā momo mea kohatu nei, he kāinga mo ngā manu, he kāinga tangata noi o nei ne. Hale me hono ki te kāinga o ngā manu. Me hono ki te ngahere, ki ngā rau, ki te ua, ki te māku, ki ngā tohu o te kō, ki ngā tohu o te ao ne. Mā te pitangata tangata ki woho, mā ane tiro, he aha ke ngā toenga o Papationuku, o te taiao, kei mua ia ia ne, e aha ngaro ana.
Aha kua kei ngā taone nui ne, aha kua kei ngā taone nui, kei reira tonu te pitomata.
Ai, tō mātua āhu e te kāingara, kei te tangi tonu mātia mātu tarau I te rūri ngā wākato ne, ka tiro te taha arohatu ana. Kei kona katoa ngā momo kalarehe nei ne, era mea katoa ne. Tōna tiranga me ngāhere. We tahi wāhi e tāia, we tahi wāhi he pāmuki ne. Engari ngā wāhi e takato kau ana, me hakato mahi ngā kai, hakato rākau. Ana te whenua anu e karanga anu ki te tangata. Ma te whenua anu e kōrero, ma te moana e kōrero, ma te au e kōrero. Haura tā ngā hapu, e mahi ngai roti te kāinga, ka hoki rā te ke roti a rātu anō. Atiro. Ka aro hatu. Ki ngā mea kei te ngaro. Ali paka, e tai te whakahoki mai. Roti ngā mahi ngā ringa nei. Ka pahure ki te wā mo te kōrero māngai atu, me mahi te mahi. O tai ki te wā, me hiki ngā ringa. Whakatina na hia ngā ngā wawata mai rāno. Margaret?
Ai, mau pēr māku pēr e whakarapopoto ki te reo Pākehā, just so that everyone can understand. And I've just given an example of how sometimes our questions are answered with questions, and that's the best way for us to seek and to be encouraged to look outside in so many ways, look outside to our environment. What is here, even though we're in an urban environment? And I relate to what you're saying because I'm in Auckland as well, but there is opportunity. Me mahitahi tātou, like there are ways of looking at what the environment is telling us, what the sea is telling us, what we have as opportunities that we haven't considered in the environment. Margaret, I'll turn over to you as long as you heard the context of that question as well. Bringing it into an urban environment.
Aroha Mai, can you repeat? Sorry, unfortunately, our connectivity in Hokianga with the rain and such is affecting. So, could you ask that part?
Sure. The question was around how can your amazing kaupapa be adapted into an urban environment, and that's in terms of mahinga kai mara, kai ora, kai hauora, rongoā training under the HNZ. So people looking for ways that they can be inspired by your mahi, knowing that they're in a very different environment. And as we've just been encouraged, that we're going to have to look outside to our own environment and see what we can engage with. Engari he whakaro anō, any other question, any other thoughts that you could offer people looking for the inspiration?
I think you've given me the wheel to answer your question with a bātai, but I'll try not to do that. I think if we look at because I've only been home for 18 months, so I've been away doing other mahi and have come home to Hokianga in the last 18 months, but was here 15 years ago as a community services manager. And back then we started having this kōrero about implementing and supporting rongoā within our huipere. And back then, my measly approach back then was to start a little marakai, and that little garden is still there, but it's been swamped by everything else that's been grown since, which is beautiful because that's what progress is all about. I think there are a lot of principles that can be transferred into an urban environment. I think, and Hone provides that kōrero to this, is that part of the change and the commitment has been, and some of our kaimahi would say that it needs to come from a senior level within an organisation, if we're looking at an organisation, to support the kaupapa essentially. So the principles by which we would ensure that, the example that has been provided in our journey, where you get some of the management team to do the training so that they have an understanding and an appreciation of what's been trying to be done. So that principle by which translating this into an urban environment, having everyone on the kaupapa by doing the training for a start, and then looking beyond the physical resources to sort of see what commitment can be made in that space. So I think there are some principles that can be transferred and translated so that we can that's what has been achieved here can be achieved elsewhere. But there's many examples across Aotearoa around how something that we've done here is working in other spaces and places. I mean, unfortunately, when you look to an urban environment, it is a concrete jungle. So how do you work beyond? How do you take that beyond? But I think if you look at some examples around the motu where even in urban streets and such, rather than just planting flowers and such that have, I wouldn't say no purpose, but if you look at planting rongoā, like fruit trees, like other edible rongoā that can be around, then that's about engaging whānau and community as potentially that starting point within an urban and concrete jungle, as it were.
And Hone was saying, it's also about the Māori that we participate in, and we can't really expect ourselves to feel the same in an environment that is a concrete jungle, can we? Kāre he Māori o ngā mea tipu ana ki mea wāhi ki mea wāhi. So just, Margaret, while you're there and while the Wi-Fi is good, another question. What was the setup process and what were the barriers that you faced?
Well, Hone could probably, and Faith could probably speak more to that. But in the time that I've been, well, even if I just, the kōrero that I just provided 15 years ago when I was here as a manager, we tried to establish a marakai here on site at the Huipere. And like I said, there's the remnants of this garden that we initially developed. And then, of course, 10, 15 years went past before other things started emerging. I think for starters, the momoia and the passion and the energy for the likes of Hone and others that have kept that alive has been an absolute foundation for us progressing what has been achieved here. The pūtea, whilst has been good, has been obviously helpful, but also having that commitment. And we have, and I just want to acknowledge Jessie McVeigh, who you would have seen in the video, but was also the producer for the film, for the video that we pulled together in a couple of weeks, actually, because I said to, we sort of talked about how we might present our journey, and developing a video like that was just a beautiful way of capturing a lot of people's kōrero rather than just having Hone presenting in this space. So some of the barriers that were articulated and highlighted in that video were around the senior management support of a kaupapa like this. So getting them on board and having, as stated, a manager that did the rongoā training to understand what is it that was being trying to be achieved, having the commitment from our community as well. Part of the challenge is then having someone like Jessie that has this vision herself and her understanding around what to plant, when to plant, why to plant, how to plant, all of that whakaaro and knowledge that comes to the table. And the challenges that we've faced, because as a hohipere we don't have fences here, so we have anyone and everyone comes on site. Unfortunately, there has been a couple of occasions where the marakai itself has been decimated by someone coming in not being very happy with something. But what's happened is that's then rallied the whānau and the community to come together to replenish that and to refocus it. When we talk about the challenges about this te ao Māori and te ao Pākehā around the Mātauranga Māori in the clinical space, that has been a challenge, and you would have heard our medical director talking about some of those challenges. So there's a lot to be learned in that space around sharing our Mātauranga and understanding and appreciating both worlds. But I think we've made huge inroads into where we've got to at the moment, and working with our Pākehā colleagues, but also our Māori colleagues that aren't quite, that may be coming from a clinical rather than a cultural perspective. That's about, again, reiterating the value, not so much the value add, because that undermines a little bit about rongoā, but actually appreciating what it is. And I think what if one other challenge has been, and one other strategy has been to just dominate the space. So we've dominated by virtue of, Faith and Liza and having our rongoā on site, and it's in everyone's face and space, and just dominating the environment so people get, so yesterday it might be something new, today well, yesterday it might not exist, today it's something new, and tomorrow it just becomes the norm. So dominate. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kauru ngā kaupapa, i ngā mero te hoipere, i te tīni, te mei tīni ngai ngā whakahaere te hoipere. Rua te kaumā 5 ngā tau, te hoipere katoa kei roti te ringaringo te iwi. Nō reira, he atataki roa, i ka pera rau o te roa. I roti ngā tau e rua nei, ka tahi ana ka whakauruhia. Tēnei momo mauri ki roti ngā pāti te hoipere. Tōna tikanga i taua taura, rua te kaumā 5 kimori, koe te ko te rā tuatahi, whakamāori ngai, ngā wahanga kato te hoipere roto me waho. Ngare kua rua te kaumā 5 tau pahure, ka tahi anō te hoipere, nia ka oho. O roke te iwi e klangāna. Engari, ngā te tīni o ngā whakahaere, ka ora te kaupapa. O tākui tēni. Te tīni te whakahaere. O ngā kaipakahaere te hoipere, nā ka kārāki te kaupapa ki roto te hoipere, ka mea katoa ngā kaipakahaere, ana whakakia i waho, whakakia roto ngā pāti te hoipere, whakakia ki roto i te wairua, te hene ngauru me te Mātauranga ngā kaimai te hoipere. Kei te takahia mā te rehuara i te wānei, te rihorahi nei kei tōna timatanga ke. Hele te mea kei waiga nui mātu ti horahi nei. Hei tōna timatanga noi ho nei mātu. Rui te kau mā rima tau, te hoi pere ro te ngā mana whakahaere tīwa te kai. No reira he momo, e rape whakamātera. He hoa tera ka pera rawa te roa. Rua tau me te hāpe, ko Māori haere te hoi pere. No reira koe e tera te hau. Ko roa, te iwi ro te kāinga Mai Rongoā, na haere mare ki te warātu tūrora, warātu whanau ngano, ka tari mai rongo ki roto rātu pēke, ka mi te kuhuanga, ka whāngahi atu. Nā roti te wāne, ka kore pēra hia, ka mau roti te ringaringa kia ki te katoa ngā rata, me ngā nāhi. Ne, nō reira kei te oho, ko roa ke tō tāti iwi te kāinga nei tatari mai ana. Ko te hoi pere ka tahi anō ka oho. Ki te āmene ki te whakai atu. Ki tēnei wahanga te hīkoi. Kei konei te kaupapa, ngai tōna whakaotinga kei runga ke. Nō reira he roa no te wāhe he pikinga mo te kaupapa i roti a māti roto i te hoi pere nei. I roti te kāinga ni. Ka mihi kia Margaret, kanuhi Māori, koea ko te upoko te kaupapa. Ko Māori ngā kanuhi runga i te taumata mānihia o te hoipere. Ko roke noho pāke katoa. Nā te tini o ngā hunga ki roto wera tūranga. Ka ara, ka pūmau, ka whakai atu, ka pōwhiritia, ka hoatu. Hale te me he muni, ngai ko hoatu, te horahi wā te mai tu horahi mau. Ma kau te whakairi hea wā kau te kaupapa ki roto.
Tēnā koe.
Ka hari mātou.
Good realism there from Hone, that it's taken 25 years and how frustrating that is, considering it was supposed to be under iwi jurisdiction, and yet it takes Margaret and it takes you all to just in the last few years be able to make that progress. And I'm just making some summaries to make sure that people can all understand. He kōrero anō au, anything more to add to that? Because I don't want to block you out.
Kamutu, I te mea kamutu, tahi tau me te hāpea. O mātu tanga te peri tako wahine nei mahi ana. One ko te koha ko te aroha. Ne te utu mōna ko te aroha. Kei runga katoa ngā hunga nei mahi warai te mai utu katoa ni utu katoa ni utu katoa ana. Mo ngā kaupapa pēne ka tīmata roti te pōharatanga. Ngai ka kore pōhara te aroha ne. O te aroha ke te kai tono tono ngā hunga nei ke mahi tunu rātu mahi. And that's the true aspect of the tīmatanga mai te kaupapa roti te hoipere. Ko roa ke te wā māu tangi ana. Wetahi tangi ana. Kua pēhitanga ne, i te mea, ngari kei te ora, hea te mea ora ana. Kei te whakapati tunu mātu ki wetahi tanga te kia ho mai he raua. Peri te mei nei, ani tō mātou trau. Hero ki te, pehe te pari taku trau, ka whakātou tau kia koe. Kia aro hai nā hau ne, kia ho mai he kaupapa. Ka mo māwhina ne. Nō reira ko kore tika ke pēra wetahi atu. Me he mea koutou ro te pāgare we te takiwa takihia koutou te ni horahi. Ke horo ngā kai āwhina pēre te kawanatanga. Whakarite mai. Te korowai. Mana ki te werahunga. Kaua koutou takihi te horai takihi ai mātou, ne?
Kia ora. Kua hangaia he arapiti e koe. Kia whakawhiti ngā kōrero kia John. So thank you for bridging our kōrero straight to John, because this question says, what role can the Ministry of Health play in actively supporting Rongoā going forward, given the new health restructure? And as Winnie said, you know, how does this turn up in terms of the new structure, and how can we make sure it doesn't take 25 years and a lot of frustrated people?
Well, I'll get to the frustrating in 25 years, secondly, but I'll speak first to who has a role to play in this, in the current and future system, which is about to start on Friday. There's a big role that the Ministry continues to have as the Minister of Health's primary advisor on legislation, on regulation. Part of that is the work we're already doing with Te Kāhui Rongoā around the therapeutics protection, therapeutics regulations, for instance. So there's still a big role there. The Ministry will still, on the behalf of the Minister, be responsible for making sure that the government meets its treaty responsibilities. Its responsibilities in relation to particular claims, Y2575 is an example of that. There are a number of claims that involved iwi and hapu still, where there is a health kind of component where the ministry, or a component where the ministry still may be involved in that area of things, and also to be monitoring the results. One of the big jobs the ministry has now is to monitor the performance of these new organisations as to whether or not they're achieving what we aspire for them and what the government aspires for them. On the other side of that, there is a big task we have to do in supporting both Health New Zealand and the Māori Health Authority. A number of their key responsibilities are engaging with communities, helping communities to establish and articulate their own voice, working with communities to decide on what their priorities are, and then taking those forward into planning and services and ultimately contracting to make sure we deliver services. So big role for Māori Health Authority and Health New Zealand in that space, but also a continuing role for the ministry in keeping an eye on the system and alongside the minister, ultimately being responsible for delivering on kāwanatanga and our treaty obligations.
Tēnā koe. So that expression of how it works is actually something that has come up a lot today. And Belinda has a pātai for you, Whaidona. Thank you for that very insightful and interesting kōrero. She says it might be a silly question, but to be able to provide traditional and authentic rongoā practice alongside Western practice, is it possible for health professionals who are not Māori to be able to train and become recognised in terms of the weekend warrior statement that really rang true? So how does someone become trained in this area and know that their training is authentic, the tuturu? From my own perspective, this is desperately needed, and it's something that we'd like to make sure is practiced properly, not just to tack up a sign that says I can.
Kia ora. That's a really good pātai. We get asked that a lot. Can non-Māori come and do this? Can you connect to the wairua? You know, because we have to be able to connect to wairua to be able to practice Rongoā Māori, and that's not to say non-Māori can't. It's, you know, these are our questions. Do we understand the tikanga, tikanga, not just tikanga a rongoā, but tikanga katoa? You know, it's the way we are, it's who we are, it's how we conduct ourselves, it's the values that we have, that we bring to the table. It's not something, you know, in my experience, there's aspects of rongoā that people ask me, how do I learn this? And I go, well, you know, in my experience, that learning comes when it's needed. It's not something we can teach in a wānanga. You can't, in my view, you know, the world according to Donna, you can't teach somebody how to look after a tūpapaku in a university class. That doesn't happen in a wānanga. When the time comes, and if you're the right person, someone will step forward and put their arm around you, and they will say, let me show you, let me help you. And that is how you learn. And then when the time comes and you see someone else who needs that knowledge, then you share it with them in the appropriate moment, at the appropriate time, so that they can learn at the time of grieving, at the time of sadness, how to push through that and how to be able to give back and help. You can't create that in a class or on a course. You have, it's lived experience. And so it's going to be a challenge for non-Māori, but it's not impossible. It's not impossible. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question. You know, we try really hard to be inclusive, not exclusive. That's really important. And, you know, I always look back to my tupuna and, you know, people say, oh, well, is this rongoā just for Māori? And I go, you know, I can hear my koro saying, you know, if they need a hand, give them a hand. He never thought about whether they were Māori or not Māori. If somebody's hungry, feed them. If you can help, help. It's not exclusively Māori. We are inclusive. And I hope that as a result of being more inclusive, we will we'll build a much stronger kaupapa for the well-being of all New Zealanders. So, you know, that's my whakaaro on it. It's challenging enough being Māori trying to learn. I don't know how I'd learn if I wasn't Māori. So, kia ora.
Yeah, our ways of knowing, that's also been is right, the person is right. And I've also witnessed it happening, not just with people of this world, but ka tohu tohungia te tangata e ngā tūpuna. So tēnā koe te hohunutanga o wena kōrero. Just to let everybody know, we will finish a little bit early today because everyone has been so onto it, our pū kōrero, and so we want to get through as many questions as we can, but just kia mōhio mai koutou, we will finish a little bit early. But say a question like this from Gillian, everyone could lean into if you have an answer. How can Rongoā Māori help hapū mama in terms of their mental health?
Oh. So, do you want to start? Or? Okay, I'll do it. Well, I'll start because these fellas are the ones on the front line now. I'm not on the front line as much as I'd like to be. I guess the thing for me is helping our mamas. It's about allowing them to be Māori. It's about making sure that they that we wrap our korowai around them in a community. You know, I heard one of our whaia, I'm going to name her, which is going to embarrass her, but never mind. Whaia Marilyn talked last night when we were having kai together about, you know, when we have 7 generations living at one time on our whenua, then we know that the land is well and we are all well. When we are living with the rhythms of nature, where we have our babies, when we're able to have our babies, when we count the babies that are in our puku as being alive, you know, and we have these 7 generations, then of course we are going to be well, because to achieve that, we must be living with the rhythms of nature. And so we have to do that as much as we can for our hapu mama, for everybody, to make sure that we are living the life that connects, one, to the whenua, to the taiao, to the natural world. The other one is to make sure that we do our part to be inclusive, make sure that nobody is left behind, that we inspire hope in people, that we make sure that people know they belong, and that we make sure that people know and understand the gifts they bring and how they can contribute. And when we can do that, not only for our hapu mama, but for everybody, then we're going to have much less of the problems that are escalating at a rapid rate at the moment. We've become disconnected from each other, disconnected from the whenua, and we're going to see problems like this. And our way is to re-establish our connections. Our way forward to well-being is to re-establish our connections.
Te mea, tēnei me te mea te maa mai, me o te wahine ke haku ai, ka miti me whaitāne ne. No reire ko te kōrero, te tei whakaaro me he nui rawa tēnei kaupapa. He nui rawa ngā whakaaro, ka miti me ngā tikanga mo te whakauru ki roto, hei mana ki whai ai, te tū, te noho, te moe, a rāua tahi ne. Ko te tahi wahanga me whakahoki mai ki roto, ko te mana ki hikoi tahi ai, te hapu. Ne? Ngā kaumātua tōna hapu ano, ngā kaumātua tōna mai ano, hikoi ngā tahi. Kia rāua tahi te māma me te kamiti me tōna pēpi rote ai, kamiti me tāna tāne me te whānu katoa ne. Ia iei tōna kāinga ko tōna kāinga tēra ko tōna whānu pātata tērā. Ngari whānu anō tōna kei wahora. Kei he tamana, he mana nui kei rote tērā honunga i waho. Ka kōrero hea nei, marae, hapu, kaumātua, e rā mea katoa ki hikoi ngā tahi. Tai noa ki te wai te kōpuitanga, pēni te mei nei, kia rongo katoa te hapu, e moko pune haere mai ana. He uri hau e haere mai, whakatupuringa hau e haere mai ana. Me te whakanui, i ngā mara mā katoa, i te tā mai ea, e tupu mai ana rote, e rā mea katoa ne. Maure ki taua, maure ki te moana, whāngahia ki ngā kai. E rā honanga, whānui ki roti tōna whakapapa. I te whakapapa te pāpakato, ngā tahe rua, ka tūhonotia, ke puta he ariki. Ke puta he ariki. Kaupapa nui.
Ai, he kaupapa nui whānui. That's why we talk about pāharakeke, because that's our understanding of what it takes and what it looks like for our whānau and the wraparound of our whānau and our māma. A tāhua wena kōrero. John, he pātai tēnei ki a koe. Karen says, I support the Māori Health Authority in the return of New Zealand to Indigenous gifts of healing and health. However, how does it balance in the mix of other cultural practices of people who might call themselves Kiwi? And we're talking in terms of homeopathic, osteo, all of those different types of practices, naturopathy. And I know, sorry, that you're not so much in that realm, but perhaps you could give us an overview. And that has been the joy of every Māori person that speaks at something like this. We want you to know everything. Nō reira, tēnā koe te puna mātauranga.
Kia ora. Tēnā koe mo tēnā whakahonore mai. Mai anō, ko taku kōrero tuatahi, hei tāpiri atu ki te kōrero o Donna o Honemā, mo te pātai I mui tēnei. Hea te ōroko hangatanga o te oranga hinengaro o te wahine hapuana. Kia hau nei, ko te whakahokinga tika mo tērā, ko tērā kōrero I whakahuangia e tona, katahi anui I whakahuangia. Ko te orokotanga, ko te orokohanga, te oranga o te Māori, ko tēnā wātea kia tū motuhake hei Māori. I was just reflecting as you were asking about the previous question, and actually I'm drawn to Donna's kōrero before. For Māori to be well in that fullest sense, including to be well in terms of their mental health, we must be allowed to be Māori. That confirmation and that understanding is really important. Back to the question you asked me about the place for other mātauranga in addressing our oranga moving forward, I have the same response to that I have to science. I'm not prepared to rule out that it might be useful. And in that same way as our ancestors did, I think all of these things are worth testing in terms of, do they help us support our people moving forward? I only add one particular precursor to that. We have not respected Mātauranga Māori in the past. We have not privileged Mātauranga Māori in the past, including Rongoā Māori, and we need to redress that. And that does mean that we do need to put those things forward. I'm not discounting, as Donna said, the opportunity for us to learn from other Mātauranga. Not at all. I think it's all on the table when it comes to helping our people move forward, but we must redress our historical, and I'm talking in here about the government, our historic lack of respect for the authenticity, the validity, and the place of Mātauranga Māori. And we must start with that. That's my only precursor to being open to looking at science and other forms of healing, that we have to do that in the context of respecting Mātauranga Māori as a precursor to the rest of those things.
Tēnā koe. I have a very practical question from Hene, te Waipuna. Are there any sample Rongoā Māori business plans or service plans that I could use to help resource and fund our Rongoā Māori to heal and to serve our people, which is desperately needed? So specifically talking about business plans or service plans. Kei a wai, tētahi whakautu, who has some ideas around this that you could help offer, Hine?
Oh, I think Professor Donna should start off and then we'll follow him.
Oh, kare mātou te rongo ia koe. Sorry, we can't hear you.
Kia ora. I'm back online now. It's not often people say that. I think the beautiful thing about Rongoā Māori is that it's very bespoke. It's very area specific. It's whānau specific, and I don't necessarily mean literally whānau. But, you know, the way they run things in the south and how they resource them is going to be completely different to how we run them in the north. And so you have to have a feel for your community and then base your business plan on the opportunities that prevail within your organisation. Just to pick up a template and fill that out is going to do an injustice to what could be delivered to that community. You know, we identify all the opportunities that are available. We look for how we might plug some of those gaps. But certainly the way that Faith and Hone, you know, established their business based on the support of Margaret, based on a community with 9 marae very close to where they are, is going to look very different from a place that's isolated with very few marae, to be able to draw on and to use as a venue's not the right word, but as a platform perhaps in which to take the services to Māori. All of those things are going to be quite unique to your individual areas. And I think that we should stop looking to template it. You know, this is where research is great. And, you know, I'm not even a researcher's fingernail really. But at the end of the day, this is where research is great, where you can go out and ask your community what they need. How, you know, and talk to the people about what are the assets in your community and then design your plan around that. That's what will deliver better, in my view, that's what will deliver better outcomes for your people. Get out there and talk to people who have done it. Research that. See what they did, what worked, what didn't work for them, and then see how that applies to you before you draft your plan. Because I think you could take any business plan and do that. And that's not what we're about creating here. We're about creating community-specific care for whānau, Māori and others. So I hope that answers your question. I'm not trying to fob you off, but in reality, that's how it seems to work.
We're getting a lot of nods from the people who have had lived experience. Margaret, that seemed to be something that's resonating with you. Koina te ara hei whai?
I just wanted to reflect on the fact, so with the mahi that Hone and Faith and others have done around putting together, you know, a plan of sorts, a plan or a business case, it has been about just as you have described on it. It's been about what is it that we need in our community, in our whānau, in our hapori. What is it that our whānau need? And then where are the gaps? What do we need to provide? Because and as we heard from some of our kaimahi, it was about this is what our whānau needed. This is what they wanted. Yes, we've got the service, but actually there's more that we can offer. So what does that look like? Speaking to the whānau, speaking to the people about what is it, and then drawing on what expertise you have in the area. Because, and I wanted to go back to that kōrero about these other therapies, because I would challenge these other therapies in mātauranga are probably mātauranga Māori. They're just named differently. So if we look at other therapies and other things that are offered that are under the mantle of another sort of a service or whatever, whether it be homeopathy or aromatherapy or whatever, actually that's mātauranga Māori. It's just been given a different name. And if we delve deeper into some of these things, they are mātauranga Māori. But I take John's point around the disrespect or the not acknowledgement, not acknowledging mātauranga Māori. So it's about taking all of that and identifying what does that mean to put together a plan or a business case to articulate what is needed in our respective communities. And just coming back just quickly also to the hapu mama question, I wanted to say that, you know, what can we do in terms of offering Rongoā Māori for hapu mama to help with their mental health, and Hone sort of again hit the nail on the head about it is about involving the whānau and the mum and the dad and the papa and or whoever is that in that whānau, and not medicalising being hapu, because this is a problem that we have and where our wahine get confused and the tension between what's been how they've been supported through their pregnancy and not medicalising it. So in Taitokero we have a hine kopu program through Taitokero DHB and through our whānau and here at Haura Hokianga, and that's facilitated by many beautiful wahine, including our Māori midwives and koha aprahama, who is whānau girls, kōtero. That's about not medicalising that 9-month journey and beyond, before and beyond. And like utilising our mātauranga Māori around that beautiful element of being hapu for that time, bringing our tāne into that kōrero, into those discussions, utilising rongoā and mirimiri and all of those things that will assist that wahine through that pregnancy, and not just when Bubba is born, when that pepe is born, but what then can we do to support them going forward? And again, ultimately supports their mental health and well-being as a mama and for their whānau and hapori. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Margaret. Thank you for covering all those bases and for all the mātauranga that you've offered. I think the point around what is mātauranga Māori and all of those practices being bonded under that, the other thing is that it could provide protection for everybody, because there's an element of appropriation in some of those acts. If we don't know what it comes under, if it's under mātauranga Māori, mā koutou ke tohu. So that can bring it into a very safe place in terms of its setting in Aotearoa. Our last couple of questions are all around ways to engage in hapori, engage in the community. And this one can go out to anyone, professors, kōrero, everybody alike. For those researchers that want to be sure that they adhere to tikanga in research, as Pa spoke about this morning, where can they go for guidance?
For me, go back to our marae. Go back to our marae. Go learn from home. And if you don't have a marae to go to and you don't have, then adopt one. Go do your time on the tea towels. Go get yourself adopted. There's no better place to learn tikanga. You don't learn it in a classroom. You learn it by living it. So, for those people who don't know where home is, for those people that don't have a marae that they can go to, get yourself adopted. I'm still working on getting adopted at the Chatham Islands. I've only been doing it for about 10 years. It can take a little while, but kei te pai. Sooner or later, they'll call me whānau.
Can I add to that, Stacey?
Kei roto tonu te toto te tangata ne, kei roto te toto, kei roto te whakapapa, kei mua tata nei te kanohi ne, mara kia kahata te tangata te whakapātu ki te mātauranga kei roto tōna whāna, kei kona ngā mātauranga e noho ana. Kona haere te tiro, haere te rapu, ka noho, ka kōrero, mā te kōrero, mā te ate kite, mā te haere ki te totoro, ka whiwhi koe ne. Take ka hia te ao i te whāngai a koe ki ona nei kōrero. Peria tātu mā te noho nei roto te pātu te whare, he nui ngā kōrero ke ngā pātu te whare. Ona ka noho te tangata ka hakaaro, ka wānanga, ka noho puku, ka timata mai wera mea katoa. Pere te meni ka taukinu i te tangata ne, kei roti te toto. Engari kaua waiho i te wā koe kaumātua i ka haere ki te rapurapu. Timata koe i roti tō tamarikitanga. I te tāme ora tunu nei o mātua. Ka
Aye. Tēnā koe, because that's exactly what the rangatahi have asked. How might rangatahi access more information to rongoā, and you've actually answered it as well. Engari he kōrero anō, ne John.
E tautoko ana te kōrero o tono hone rānei. Me hoki ki te kāinga, me hoki ki te ukaipo. Hei whāngai atu i a koe. I'm conscious, though, that there are not always people, as Donna said, even people as esteemed as herself are still on a bit of a journey to discover some parts. I'm sure Donna and them wouldn't say it themselves, but I'm happy to say it, that, Te Kāhui Rongoā, we have organisations that have expertise and knowledge that can also provide guidance around these things. I just want to reflect a bit on something I talked about, but I think it's something that's come out as a feature of our responses to some of the questions. Mātauranga Māori and Western science and knowledge are not the same things. They have different ways of conceptualizing things. They have different understandings of what knowledge is. They have different requirements about who can access knowledge. The Western academic tradition is largely that anyone can access knowledge. We have knowledge that's not publicly available. Example of that, whakapapa is quite often, particularly whakapapa whānau, is not actually knowledge that's available for everyone, because in our construct, you must have a connection, a tūranga waiwai to this information, and not everyone does. So I think when we think about sometimes the use of and the valid use of Mātauranga Māori, we sometimes get into tension points between what's accepted in Western academic circles as the way to access knowledge and how that knowledge is compartmentalised, envisioned, conceptualised, and it runs into conflict into how we think about knowledge. I was thinking about the question before about hapu mama. One of the answers to our response to that is we don't think about hapu mama. We think about a mokopuna that's coming into a world where they have whānau, they have iwi, they have hapu, they have hapori, they have parents, they have and all of those come together to form a fabric of thinking around what's best for that mokopuna. So actually, we wouldn't think about things in terms of hapu mama. We would be thinking about the mokopuna that we will all enjoy and benefit and be related to, and the role we all have in that regard in helping that mokopuna be well. That's an example for me of where the Western medical approach that Margaret talked about, that tends to compartmentalise things, doesn't work in our world because we don't think that way. And actually the solutions moving forward aren't that way either.
Donna, he kōrero he pātai tēnei ki a koe, what difference could the te ao Rauropi research project make for uplifting what is known about rongoā, or how are we best to use it? This mahi ko tike i a koutou.
I think really the seeds that were planted for the Te Ao Rauropi study were around making sure that rongoā remains in context, so that we understand the context within which it is, rather than the silos that some would have us describe it as. And what better way to understand that than to go out and talk to whānau and to gather that information so that people can understand context, because I think that's sometimes what we miss in the Western world. I think John was talking about that just now as well, about, you know, our rights to access of information. You pay enough money, it's your right. But in Te Ao Māori, you know, whakapapa is probably the best key to unlock your door. But the research that we have gathered is by mixing with whānau and understanding their thoughts, because it differs from place to place. Some people, you know, are at different stages of how they know and understand and deliver rongoā within their communities, and we can see that quite clearly when we go to Hokianga and talk to Faith and Hone and the team there, and then we might find ourselves going to a more urban centre where people are not whānau related, you know, and they're quite disparate, living in town, delivering that, and they have quite different challenges, I think, in terms of what rongoā means for them and how we need something that captures all of that, because all of them are real. There's no one way that is rongoā. So I'm really hopeful, having done. I've been privileged to sit in on some of the whānau interviews, just how diverse, even for me, who's been here for 20 plus years doing rongoā, the things that I may not have taken the time to think the next steps of are being raised in some of these wānanga, and while as soon as they say it, it feels like common sense, but until that comes and is put right in front of some of us dummies, that it doesn't actually, the penny doesn't drop. So that's how I think te ao raurope will add real value. The fact that we've even had this conference, that we've been able to bring together all of these agencies, all working in the same direction, on the same kaupapa, different bosses, different ways of coming into here, is the result of getting out and talking to whānau and going, my goodness, here's an opportunity for us to communicate all those differences. Because even as Māori, all Māori, we're never going to all agree. But what I think has been the great opportunity here is for us to be able to show that diversity even within Rongoā. We're not one thing. And that's where I think te ao raurope is really going to help us, helping understand those different contexts in which Rongoā sits.
Tēnā koe. Hei whakaatu I te kano rautanga, so to express that diversity as our fight, could I ask you all, or mate ngāko hihiko, whoever is feeling the wairua, to offer a last kōrero to our group as we come together today. And I think we've all felt the sense that this was needed and this was always intended for this particular day. So as we look forward to the year ahead, hahau kupu whakamutunga, aki te iwi, kua hono mai. Ka timata ki a koe, John, because I know you're always ready. Arero koi, to finish us off with the whakaatu you left with as you engaged in.
We're just going to invite our kaumātua to take the seat now, not our place. Te ora.
Kei a koe.
Koe nei, I rapungi au tētahi kōrero no ngā mātua. Te tiro whakamuri kia ngā whakamua. Koe nei te āhuaranga o tātou a Ngai Māori. I te wā nei I Matariki, koe nei te āhuaranga o Ngai Māori e pāna ki te whakamauri tonu I te mātauranga Māori. Kia hono tonu ki o tātou nei tipuna, kia mōhi o tātou te āhuaranga o rātou, kia anga whakamua tātou ki te ao hau. Koe nei kia hau nei.
Tēnā koe. Margaret, mai te taitukirau, he kōrero anō au?
I haven't been able to be here for the whole symposium, aroha mai, but for this afternoon, it's really re-impressed on me how important this kaupapa is. And if I look at our journey in Hokianga, just even over the last, 15 years, but even the accelerated version over the last couple of years, it is what can we do to support that across the motu. Because we've certainly seen the benefits of what that has brought to our whānau here in Hokianga by supporting our workforce to understand what rongoā means to us in this hauora space, to be able to integrate, or integrate's the wrong word, but to be able to bring te ao Māori, te ao Pākehā together, to tautoko and support our Pākehā colleagues to get a greater appreciation of what that means, but also to see the health improvements that it's made for us as whānau here in Hokianga. Now, if we can by any way help tautoko that for that to be accelerated in other places and spaces, then we're here. We're here, and our whānau, our kaimahi, hone and Faith and others that are on that are here on this kaupapa are here to support and tautoko. Because if what we can achieve here can be achieved elsewhere, then our whānau katoa will be in a better place. And so I spoke earlier about as of the 1st of July, with the formalisation of the Health NZ and the Māori Health Authority, who have made a commitment, and through John's team and the Ministry of Health, who have made a commitment to supporting the further future ongoing development of Rongoā Māori across Aotearoa and indigenising our health system, then this is what it's all about. And it's a very exciting time to be part of this, part of being here in 2022 and being part of the health and disability system that will create better change and better opportunities for Māori in terms of improving health and wellbeing outcomes. It's a very exciting place, and the Rongoā has a significant role in that space. So kia ora, mai tātou. thank you for having for providing an opportunity for me to be here today to listen and to hear what others have had to say, but also in terms of hokianga making a contribution to that kōrero too. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, as you say, to Mai Rongoā Māori, tēnā tātou katoa. And a report from the symposium will be available soon via the Whakauai website. We have actually emailed you an online evaluation form this afternoon. We've given you a little bit of time to fill that in. So we'd really appreciate it if you could all complete that before you leave the symposium today. And all of today's sessions have been recorded and will be available from tomorrow at least, but also for the next 3 months throughout this platform. You can use the same login details to access the platform, but you don't need any login when it comes to this hapori. Ko tātou, nōku te waimari e kia noho i wainganui ia koutou ahakoa kua kia he māngai he taringa ke ahau noho ana i wainganui ia koutou ngā mātanga, ngā tohunga, ngā ruānuku, nōku hoki te waimari. E tēnei ka whakawhiti ki a koe e te matua tohe Ashby. Hei whakakapi i wā tātou mahi tēnei rā.
Kia ora tātou. Hoi no e mihi atuna tēnei kia koutou katoa. E kutanga kōrero kata e tāne mihi atuna ki a koe. I roto rā, ko koe te tahi tangata e roto ngā tūru teitei ne, ki te tiro ngā āhuatanga te taha te krauna. E ha tēnā me te treaty partnership, tai atu rā ki ngā legislation e ko whārikini nei mua i a tātou. Tai atu rā ki te mea kōrero a koe, ko te iaha tēnā mea te mātauranga Māori, iaha tēnā mea te Western Science. Pāna tēnā ki te LAW, ki te LORE, ki tā tātou. E whiriwhiri he tiro mo tātou. Nō reira e mihi atuna tēnei kia koutou katoa, e uru mai ki te akaputa mai wa koutou kōrero katoa, tino harikoa, e pāna ki te rongoa. Ki wene waku hoa, mihi atuna ki a koe e tona, e hone, ki mihi atuna tēnei kia koutou katoa, kia koutou e hone, e John, kia koutou katoa e mihi ana, e tino mihi nui tēnei kia koutou e Stacey, ki a koe, ko koe te kai a ka haere tēnei o tātou hui te rāne, e tino mihi nui tēnei ki a koe. E tino mihi nui tēnei ki a koe, te pai e te haere ta tātou hui te rāne. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa.
Ko te aroha no he wai, e pupu ake ana, he awa he mapuna mai ana, I roto I te whatu manawa. Ko tōna matapuna he onu, ai ka rere anō. Ko tōna matapuna he onu, ai ka rere anō. He tai timu, he tai pari, he tai oe, he tai oa, he tai nui. He tai nui. He tai nui.
E te ato kaharawa, ko māti weni o pononga, e koro piko tonu nei ki raro rā I tō aroro I tēnei wā. Ko mutu rā, ta tātou hui tanga I tēnei rā, e inu e tu tēnei ki a koe maura he manaaki, ngā kaupapa katoa I whāriki nia roto tēnei wā tātou whari. Mā au e whakamana mai, I runga rā, I tō ingoa o io matu te kore, I runga rā, tau ingoa. Nō reira, tiarara, tiarara, Tiara mai nuku, tiara mai rang. Tiara mai ngā pau mai, tawhiti mai tata. Tiara te kāhui o te rang. Tiara i te pō, tiara i te awa. Tui, tui, tui.